I'm calling to order this hearing. This is a public hearing of the Committee of the Whole of the Council of the District of Columbia. I'm Phil Mendelson, Chair of the Council and Chair of the Committee of the Whole. Today is Thursday, January 22nd, 2026. Time is 10:40 in the morning, and we are in room 412 of the John A. Wilson Building. This hearing is being recorded, may even be available live. It's on the council, available on the council's website, which is www.dccouncil.gov. The subject of this hearing is teacher and principal retention. This is actually the second of two hearings that we're having on the subject of teacher and principal retention. The first hearing was yesterday, where we heard from approximately 65 witnesses with regard to the issue of teacher and principal retention and reasons for it and solutions to improve retention of teachers and principals. The purpose of this public oversight hearing is to hear from the public, which we did yesterday, expert witnesses, which we did yesterday, and from government agencies, which we're doing today, on factors that support or hinder educator retention in both the District of Columbia Public Schools and the District of Columbia Public Charter Schools. Retaining high-quality teachers and principals is critical to student success, not only in terms of academic achievement, but also in fostering students' social and emotional development. A stable and supportive school environment made possible by consistent and experienced educators plays a vital role in improving student outcomes. During the 2024-2025 school year, we saw 79% of DCPS teachers and 72% of public charter school teachers remaining at their schools. While these figures represent progress compared to the previous year, there is still significant room for improvement. The committee remains particularly concerned with several key issues that impact retention, including teacher wellness, working conditions, evaluation systems, access to coaching and professional development, and opportunities for career growth. The record in this matter says it will close 12 o'clock, 2 weeks from today, 12 o'clock p.m. on Thursday, February 5th, 2026. Yesterday's hearing, the record closed a day earlier, February 4th, 2026. And I believe that the percentage of retention for DCPS is a little higher than what we had in the hearing notice. I think it's closer to 82%, if I remember correctly, from the OSCE figures. And I had said 79% system-wide. If I remember correctly, it's somewhere around 72 or 74%. Public education-wise, yes.
Citywide of within school teacher retention, we have 78% for this school year, the 25-26 school year.
78%.
Correct.
And for DCPF, 82%.
It's 83%.
Well, that's going to be one of my questions. Let me turn to colleagues. Councilmember Felder, if you have an opening statement.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Good morning, everyone. And Mr. Chairman, I appreciate you for conducting today's hearing on such an important issue, such as teacher and principal retention across the District of Columbia public and charter schools. I was encouraged to see that in the briefing report, over the last several years, teacher retention rates have steadily increased. For example, during the 2024 through 2025 school year, retention rates reached 79% for DCPS and 72% for DC public charter schools. That is a positive trend, and I want to acknowledge and commend DCPS, OSCE, and Mayor Bowser for the progress that has been made to date. However, while the overall numbers are moving in the right direction, the data makes it clear that more work is needed, particularly to ensure that progress is being made equitably across the city. For example, in Ward 7, teacher retention rates remain lower than those in Wards 1 through 6, and there is currently about a 10% point gap in teacher retention in Ward 3 and Wards 7 and 8. That is a significant gap, and it has real and lasting consequences for our students. Students east of the river deserve the same stability, consistency, and continuity in their classrooms as students in wards 1 through 6. So today I'm particularly interested in hearing more about the key factors impacting retention, to include teacher wellness, working conditions, the evaluation system, professional development, and opportunities for career advancement. I'm also eager to learn more about what is being done right now to close these disparity gaps and ensure that improvement in retention rates are felt in every ward, by every community, and most importantly, by each of our students. So with that, Mr. Chairman, I would turn it back over to you.
Thank you. So why don't we hear from the two government witnesses and then we'll have questions. Elizabeth Ross, I think you're up first. You're Assistant Superintendent of Teaching and Learning in the Office of the State Superintendent of Education. Good morning.
Thank you, and good morning, Chairman Mendelson, Member Felder, and members of the Committee of the Whole and staff. My name is Elizabeth Ross, and I am proud to lead the Office of the State Superintendent of Education's Division of Teaching and Learning. Today, I am pleased to share that DC's teacher retention rate has reached a 5-year high, and principal retention continues to rise. Research and practice continually demonstrate that teachers are the most important in-school factor influencing student learning and lives. In DC, both our within-school and our citywide teacher retention rates have been steadily climbing. This year, DC local educational agencies reported within-school teacher retention rates of 78%, the highest rate since the 2021 school year. And DC's overall teacher retention rate is 86%, a 5 percentage point increase from 4 years ago and 1 percentage point higher than last year. Further, more than 9 out of 10 teachers who earned ratings of effective or higher elected to remain in the district's workforce this year. This is a strong signal of the health of our educational ecosystem, with our most effective teachers continuing to choose to serve our students in schools. Additionally, our DC teacher workforce is at its largest ever, with approximately 9,200 public and public charter school teachers. Simultaneously, our vacancy rate remains low, under 2%, and our student-to-teacher ratio of 11-to-1 is among the lowest in the nation. 81% of principals remained in their roles at the same school this year, a 3 percentage point increase from last year, and 91% of DC principals continued to serve as educators in the DC educational ecosystem. These data describe a stable principal workforce. The progress in educator retention in recent years coincides with DC's rapid acceleration in student proficiency in literacy and math over the past 3 years. It serves as a strong signal that our collective work as a jurisdiction to support our educators is reflected both in increased retention rates and also making a meaningful difference for student learning. OSSE plays an important role in supporting the health of the educator workforce. One of our primary responsibilities as the state education agency is serving as a timely, accurate, and trusted source for the data that describe the composition of our DC educator workforce. We remain fiercely committed to transparency and are currently in year 5 of collecting and reporting data on every DC educator through our comprehensive census data collection, the faculty and staff data collection. We annually publish these data in multiple formats, including the annual DC school report cards, our annual educator retention brief, our biennial educator workforce report, and through annual comprehensive data files that can be downloaded for use by any interested member of the public. We also provide DC LEAs with access to disaggregated data in the Educator Talent and Equity Dashboard, which is designed to support strategic staffing decisions based on LEA and school need. Additionally, OSSE annually collects and publishes data that support planning for our educator workforce by working directly with our 13 approved educator preparation providers to collect comprehensive data on our future DC teachers and school leaders. We leverage these data to drive system-wide supports and improvements, including the development of our OSSE Apprenticeship in Teaching program. This program, currently in its 2nd year of operation, covers tuition costs for 69 DC paraprofessionals who are earning degrees at the University of the District of Columbia in 3 high-demand subject areas: early childhood education, elementary education, and special education. OSSI also provides professional learning opportunities in core subject areas, alongside social and emotional learning trainings, multilingual learner trainings, and targeted opportunities for early career teachers. Specifically, OSSI has invested in early career coaching for graduates of DC-approved EPPs, launched a professional learning community for new special education teachers, and piloted a series of capacity building sessions to help apprentices manage time and prioritize effective lesson planning. These substantive and varied opportunities offered in multiple modalities enable OSSI to ensure that the individuals leading our classrooms and our schools have the knowledge, skills, and support they need to succeed. Alongside specific supports for our teachers, OSSI is providing targeted supports for district school leaders. Over the past 3 years, OSSI has offered a series of professional learning opportunities to support DC principals and assistant principals, including equity-centered leadership coaching. In partnership with the District of Columbia Public Schools, Howard University, and Georgetown University, OSSI has leveraged private philanthropic funds to support more than 75 district principals and aspiring leaders across the public and public charter school sectors. This work is informed and enhanced by OSSI's robust and continued engagement with DC educators. We regularly convene the Superintendent's Advisory Councils, which are representative bodies that include educators, school leaders, parents, and family members from all 8 geographic wards in DC. These individuals meet with OSSI leadership and staff to provide insights, elevate their perspectives, and ask questions that strengthen programs and policies impacting DC educators and students. In recent years, members have provided valuable input into the development of OSSI's comprehensive literacy and math plans, our social studies, financial literacy, and social and emotional learning standards, our proposed high school graduation requirements, and our forthcoming model cell phone policy. We also routinely engage with educators via our myriad professional learning opportunities, communities of practice, survey opportunities, and in-person convenings. In May, we look forward to elevating strong practices and highlighting some of our exceptional educators and schools at our 2nd annual DC Educator Workforce Summit. The educator data described here today affirm that the state of our DC educator workforce is strong. I am proud to work alongside so many individuals across the city to ensure that we continue the progress we have made so that all DC students are consistently in classrooms and schools led by exceptional educators. Thank you for the opportunity to participate in this important conversation today. I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, Ms. Frost. Can you hold off just a second, Chancellor? Sorry about that. Thank you. When you're ready.
Ready? Good morning, Chairman Mendelson, council members, and members of the public. I'm Dr. Louis D. Fairby, Chancellor of the District of Columbia Public Schools, and DCPS is proud to report that teacher and principal retention rates have improved significantly over the past decade, and we're committed to sustaining this progress. Effective teachers and principals are the greatest factors that influence success of students and school communities. Whether it's making historic gains on DC CAPE assessments, or achieving record graduation rates, or strengthening enrollment or improvement as a school district is directly tied to DCPS educators. Thank you to everyone who supports our students every day, and thank you to everyone who testified on yesterday. And my team and I continue to review the testimony shared. We're committed to being responsive to the feedback. A little over a year ago, I sat in the same seat to speak about teacher and principal retention. At that hearing, I spoke about the overwhelming majority who chose to return to DCPS. Today, I am pleased to share that even more teachers are choosing to stay and make a difference in DCPS. 90% of teachers return to DCPS and 83% return to the same school, and principal retention remain incredibly high, with 95% returning to DCPS and 93% returning to their same school. In addition to these headline numbers, please take note of a few other data points mentioned in the package that you received, council members. Rates for retention are the highest for our effective and highly effective teachers, those who make the most impact for students and their school communities. Retention roles and wards historically identify as having the highest level of need. Within school retention, in Ward 7 is now on par with the district average. 3/4 of DCPS principals have 3 or more experience years, and they're currently serving in their current school. The conclusion is clear. Teacher and principal retention rates have consistently improved over the last decade. Today, I want to highlight 3 factors that contribute to this improvement: leadership pipelines, high-quality professional learning experiences, and competitive compensations and benefits. DCPS encourages principal stability through a robust leadership pipeline. When educators are trained to become principals within DCPS, they're more likely to succeed and remain in their role long-term. All new DCPS principals receive supports in the fall, and there are also many former DCPS assistant principals. This year, we relaunched the Mary Jane Patterson Fellowship to support aspiring assistant principals. And in addition to that, we have a dedicated school leadership recruitment, selection, and development division that supports our principals throughout the year with coaching, mentors for new principals, and opportunities for development. Beyond the school system itself, DCPS also works closely with partner organizations such as the Wallace Foundation, the School Leader Lab, Georgetown University to provide excellent support to leaders in our pipeline. Most professional development for educators is led by school-based instructional teams. Central services staff help teachers and school leaders and coach our educators as well. At each school, teachers work together in seminars called LEAP, which stands for Learning Together to Advance Our Practice. LEAP offers exciting opportunities for teachers to take on increased instructional leadership opportunities within their building. We know a teacher's career can take several paths, and we think it is important to provide different opportunities for teachers to grow both in and beyond the classroom. These seminars are led by school-designated LEAP leaders. These leaders can be instructional coaches, assistant principals, and other educators who participate in our Teacher Leadership Innovation Program, also known as a TLI. Each school, not central services, designs the LEAP seminar sequence to address the unique needs of the educators at their school. Central services teams support the development of these plans through monthly LEAP leader professional development and direct feedback on seminars, observations, and other feedback mechanisms. In effect, central services' role is to coach the school-based teams so that teachers can receive the supports they need daily. Educators at DCPS continue to earn some of the highest salaries in the nation. In addition, we provide competitive performance and retention bonuses, regular salary increases, and wellness days as a part of a collective bargaining agreement. While compensation is critical, we are also focused on improving the working conditions in other ways, like streamlining operational responses and also working more quickly to respond to concerns. We have reduced administrative burdens on teachers, responded more quickly to educator needs, and strengthened a culture of care and respect. We're confident this approach is working, and we've seen continuing improvements in these metrics and fewer concerns raised by our teachers and principals. While we made significant progress, we know we still have much more to do. We have much to celebrate, but I also want to highlight one area of focus this year, and that is consistency across clusters in schools. Our principals are supported by an excellent team of instructional superintendents, each responsible for a cluster or a group of schools within DCPS. You heard from one of them yesterday, Superintendent Jake Lappy. While each cluster has different needs, part of our job at Central Services is to promote consistency across the system when it comes to principal evaluation, support offered, and overall operations. Educators continue to return to DCPS to teach our students and to lead our schools. Because of the investments we made in leadership pipelines, professional learning, and the operational work of supporting our workforce, teacher and principal retention continues to improve in DCPS. We look forward to our continued collaboration with the council to further strengthen a system where great educators, I should say, choose to stay and lead and work in DCPS. Thank you for the opportunity to testify today. I look forward to answering your questions at this time. Chairman Mendelson, I do want to give you some context. I believe the difference in the 83% and the 82% is what I see reporting is teachers coming back to the same role within the school. We're reporting teachers that return to the same school. So they may have a different role, but they're returning back to the same school. And Councilmember Felders, as I mentioned earlier, we've seen significant increases in Ward 7. Ward 7 had an increase of 3.8 year over year, which is something we're excited about, even though, as I said earlier, across the district, we know we have more work to do. So again, I rest for questions at this time. Thank you.
Thank you. And I was struck, Chancellor, at the end of your testimony, you talk about consistency across clusters. I will have a question at some point for you with regard to consistency in some of the impact questions from school to school. That'll come a little bit later. I have an off-topic question for you, Chancellor, that came out of yesterday's hearing. A teacher testified, I'm looking at his testimony, I am still having difficulty keeping up with demands of planning due to lack of curriculum. With regard to Spanish, we are given mostly empty unit guide documents with vague ideas of what we are to teach. Resources are scarce and often non-functional. Most importantly, the curriculum is not aligned to a text that we can pull from. So I gave Abe a tip-off that I was going to ask you this question, so it shouldn't be a surprise. It's not exactly on topic, but I thought I would follow up from yesterday's
Yeah,
hearing.
thank you for the follow-up. Abe did flag that for us. We did hear the testimony, and our team, from the Central Services perspective, have had several conversations with Mr. Lake at MacArthur, and we'll continue to reach out to him and his principal to ensure that he has the proper supports. But most of what he described, the supports needed to be effective in the Spanish classroom have been provided. I think there just needs to be, again, more clarity for him and the types of supports that he needs. But the curriculum is aligned. There are wide ranges of curriculum materials and resources to use for Spanish classes. Particularly, I think he mentioned the thematic units and maybe Spanish 3. And so we will reiterate all of the resources available to ensure that he can successfully deliver on that curriculum for the classroom.
So your testimony is that first, there is a curriculum, and second, that it is aligned, and third, that you or your folks are working with him in a supportive way.
Yes, our team, even prior to yesterday, our team has had conversation with Mr. Lake. There's scope and sequence within the thematic units. The units are aligned, and there are also suggested curricular tasks, and there's also Canvas resources. So we will, again, reiterate what those resources are so that he can be successful in the classroom.
Okay. So let's see. I want to pursue a little bit this discrepancy in data. In DCPS, the retention rate of teachers, according to OSSE, is?
Thank you so much. So consistent with what the Chancellor just shared, OSSI calculates retention over a number of different categories because we know that the data are meaningful to different individuals for different purposes. And so OSSI calculated this year based on data that DCPS reported through our annual faculty and staff data collection, a stayers rate. Our stayers are an individual who is in the same school in the same role of 82%. DCPS subsequently calculated a within school retention rate of 83%. So those are individual teachers who are in their same school, but potentially not necessarily in the same role.
And Chairman, if I may, I think it's important because what's been conveyed to us is teachers appreciate the ability to have a career ladder within DCPS. And so I think it's good that teachers have an opportunity to take on different roles, but stay in the same school. And so we believe that that is important metrics to consider, not only whether a teacher stays in the school, but also the types of roles that
I
they're in.
agree, there's a value to teachers feeling like there's a mobility pathway. On the other hand, witness after witness and experts make clear that a teacher who has been teaching for a long time is a much better teacher and a more valuable teacher. So there's a lot to be said for in the same position. I get what you're saying, but we want Mrs. Smith to be teaching kindergarten for 20, 25 years. She just
We
does
also-
it a lot better than Mrs. Jones, who's only taught it for 1 year. But let's not use up all my time on that.
Sure.
What about principal retention? So what does OSSI say principal retention is?
OSSI has calculated citywide principal retention. So that is an individual, the stayer rate, an individual who stays in their role in their school at 81%. We have an 83% rate of movers. So that's an individual who stays in their role but moves among schools. So a principal that goes from school A to school B. And then a changer, a principal that moves into a different role type, rate of 7%, combined for a rate of 90% of our principals that are staying in our educational ecosystem, continuing to serve our students and our schools.
Do you have it for DCPS?
I can pull that. I don't have it in front of me in this moment.
And, okay,
Yeah,
so
so in DCPS, that number is above 90%. Yeah, and all of these numbers, DCPS numbers are gonna be higher than the state.
mover is principal in a different school?
That is correct. So an individual who is moving their school, but not their role, they are sustaining as a principal.
And Chairman, if you like our calculation, if you're in DCPS and you're in the same school, it's 93%. If you are still in DCPS, it was 95%.
You confused me because your testimony said 91% principals continue to serve as educators in the DC educational ecosystem. That doesn't actually say same school. Oh,
Yeah.
81%.
I'm just
No,
slicing,
yeah,
since there was a question about staying within DCPS and staying in the
Yeah.
same school, it's 93% if you are in the same school and 95% if you're still in DCPS.
so this is an oversight hearing. So for me, this is not an opportunity to sit here and celebrate and focus on how things have improved, but rather, why aren't things even better? Having said that, why is 18%? So that's 82% teachers stayed in the same school in the same role. Why is 18% worth celebrating? Data that we have suggests that nationally turnover is between 7 to 9%, even 9% in urban districts, compared to 18% at DCPS. the national, so we would just looked up what are attrition rates nationally, just not talking teachers, but just in general, 13%. That's less than 18%. I'm not quite sure how you can answer the question, but I'll give you a chance. I just think 18%, it's great, it's getting better. It's not the highest it's ever been. It's the highest it's been in 5 years. I think that's what Ms. Ross said. I just don't see why that's good to celebrate. I asked I looked at what the salary lapse rate is in our budget formulation. The OCFO used a figure of 8.2%. Now, salary lapse is different than attrition or turnover, but there's some correlation there. Because what we're saying is that with salary lapse, that agencies are going to see about an 8.2% savings because of turnover. You're at 18%. Different ways of measuring it. Why is that worth celebrating?
Well, we're not satisfied, and we're always in a mode of continuous improvement. But as we have these discussions, I think the questions is always around how do we improve? And I'm encouraged, and I think the council and our school community should be encouraged by the progress that's being made. Now, there's clearly more work to do, as I shared in my testimony. And if you look at DCPS and other urban school districts, I think there is a lot to be celebrated in terms of our ability to improve on these outcomes. So we have taken steps to improve. As I said earlier in my testimony, a focus for this year is consistency across our clusters. But also at the same time, we're balancing a central services team that has been reduced consecutively over the last 4 fiscal years. And so we are supporting schools with less resources. But I think we should be encouraged by the results that we've seen and improvements made.
And if I may chime in on that salary lapse point, when an individual moves within the system, so the right calculation for salary lapse would not be that within school, within role, because
Oh, sure, I get that. It's just a rough correlation. And actually, I just looked a little more closely at the data I was given. For an agency the size of DCPS, the salary lapse rate is supposed to be 5%. That's where the CFO starts as a matter of policy. It's probably a little bit higher when the budget's actually formulated, beside the point. 5% salary lapse isn't the same as turnover, but it does correlate with turnover, right? You wouldn't have salary lapse if you didn't have turnover. 5%. Nationally with teachers, 9% in urban districts, generally across the country, 13%, and just staying within the same school, 17% at DCPS. We have a long way to go. So how many teachers does DCPS have?
We roughly have about 5,000 educators.
All right, so forgive me here, but I'm going to do 18% of, you said 5,000? So that's 900. And how much does it cost to hire a teacher? I was told yesterday $25,000. Does that sound right?
I'm not sure. We'd have to check that. Where did you hear that from?
One of the witnesses? That equals $22.5 million. There's a point there. It costs a lot of money for turnover. And when I took $3 or $4 million out of Central last year as part of the budget to put in schools, my recollection was that $3 or $5 million was money that you felt you really needed in Central. The point just being that $22.5 million is a lot of money, that if the turnover rate's lower, you have a lot more money. Correct?
Yeah, I'm not sure.
I'm not sure you like
that
my line of
logic.
questioning, but
Yeah,
so
because
I'm
I think
saying-
but you also have to think about effectiveness, right? So do we want to sustain a significant number of educators that are not effective? And I think effectiveness has to be a factor in.
So is your
If you
testimony
calculate the
that most of
cost.
the 17% who leave are poor quality teachers?
Well, I would say the majority of the teachers that are retained are most
That was not
effective.
my question.
I think in DCPS, either you improve over time or you transition out of the district.
Well, we got testimony yesterday, and I'm guessing you wouldn't disagree with this, that the turnover rate is highest among first-year teachers, teachers in the first 5 years. That doesn't correlate to quality of teaching. That correlates to just the challenges, burdens, struggles of being a new teacher.
I think it does represent the challenges, but also I think nationally, you see a lot of the young workforce are new to the profession, making decisions that, they thought they wanted to be an educator and they decided that they want to pursue.
Sure,
other
well, but that
pathways.
brings up another question then, which is why are you hiring people that don't want to stay in the system? I don't really want to go there, and I'm not saying that's what you're doing, but I am trying to make the point that 17% is a lot of turnover. And rather than sitting here in an oversight capacity saying, let's celebrate that this is a 5-year high, or let's celebrate that there's been this annual trend of increasing retention, that as an oversight matter, we want to focus on the fact that that number should be even lower. And you don't disagree because you said that there's still room
Don't
to
disagree
improve.
at all.
I'm just harping on that point and saying that if you compare to other indicators like salary lapse or like national average of
Well, I
all
think the
workers,
national average numbers you're quoting are not the same. So there's not Fuji apples to Fuji apple because you are comparing within a school as a teacher, same position. Those are not national numbers.
sure, but the 17% is teachers who stayed within the same school. I didn't write down what the number is of teachers who stay within the system. The fact of the matter is that it costs you money with the turnover. It means that schools don't have the level of expertise that we want to build up. When I say expertise, I mean experienced teaching workforce. And that it's clear from other metrics that we can do better. Councilmember Felder, do you have questions?
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. And picking up, Chancellor, where the chairman left off, data has consistently shown that teachers with less than 1 year of experience have significantly lower school retention rates compared to a teacher with 10 years worth of experience. So my question is, could you speak to what specific support are in place during the teacher's first couple of years to allow them to be acclimated, to get used to the environment in which they're working in?
Yeah, so I think it's important to note that DCPS, again, I know this is an oversight here and we're talking about some of our challenges, but I also think you should recognize areas where we made progress.
Yep.
If you look at new teacher retention, we've seen a 4% increase year over year, right?
Yep.
So we see more and more of our beginning teachers staying in the district. And a lot of that is attributed to the types of professional learning experiences that we provide to teachers when they enter in DCPS, whether they are new to DCPS or new to profession. Dr. Bay, who oversees all of our academics, can share a little bit more about some of the context of what teachers receive, such as mentoring, coaching, and supports.
Gotcha.
Thank you, Chancellor. Yes, just to piggyback off of that, we start each year with our new educator orientation, which
Okay.
is very robust, that provides support and resources to new teachers, not only new to the profession, but also new to DCPS. And, we get rave reviews in terms of the benefits of that couple of days in which we have all new teachers together. We also provide targeted support to new teachers during pre-service week,
Okay.
and that is done centrally, as well as creating professional learning communities or PLCs throughout the year, specifically for new teachers. We also provide them with mentor teachers, both that exist inside of their buildings, but also outside of their building, so that they are able to get that coaching and support from someone who is in the field, who's doing the same work that they do. In terms of in the school leaders are really targeted in their support for their new teachers, and they design what their new teacher programs look like based upon the needs of their new teachers. So that can include, again, additional professional learning communities that are within the school, assigning mentors, instructional coaches and TLIs prioritize the needs of new teachers. And so new teachers get lots of touch points with their instructional coach and or TLI or assistant principal. And so I say all that to say that the needs of new teachers is really prioritized, and we'll continue to prioritize that both at the central level as well as at the individual school level.
Copy. Now, if you were to categorize the different type of teachers, special education teachers currently have the lowest retention rate citywide. Could you speak to what immediate interventions are underway to stabilize the special education workforce?
Yeah, I think the big thing here is the types of professional learning experience and supports that they receive. Area of focus that we've identified this year based on feedback is also the instructional aides that are supporting special education educators, especially in our self-contained environments. Also, in addition to that, we've had professional development that is very targeted, that even begins over the summer, specifically for our teachers that are serving students that have IEPs.
Now, career and technical education teachers show similar low retention rates. Could you speak to what has been the biggest challenge in retaining those teachers?
I think the biggest challenge has been just a lot of opportunities for individuals who have expertise in these areas. So for example, if you're an HVAC expert or you're an electrician and you're highly regarded in the field, a lot of these individuals have opportunities outside of DCPS that we're competing with. And so in the career and technical education space, given the wide range of careers and skills that these individuals have, sometimes it's hard for us to maintain the type of retention that we would like. But we have seen progress, and I think the type, again, experiences and working conditions that they have often can be beneficial in retaining them and keeping the district, and that's something that we've been thinking about.
Now, Chancellor, beyond identifying why educators leave, does DCPS track where educators go after they leave a school? For example, whether are they staying in the district? Are they going to the surrounding jurisdictions to work?
We have an exit survey.
Okay.
In that exit survey, we do try to gather as much information around why they're choosing to exit the district, what they intend to do next. And the vast majority of individuals who complete the survey share with us that the reason that they're transitioning is that they're relocation. Yeah.
And just a follow-up, is there a mechanism to flag schools with repeated high turnover and require targeted intervention or additional support?
There is. So great question. We have a tiered intervention model where we look at schools that have the lowest retention rate in the district, and we try to target our resources and support to those schools. It's important to note we had 15 targeted schools last year. Of those 15 schools, 13 made improvements in their retention rate. So we feel good about the types of supports that we provided. And we are working closely with schools this year where we see those types of supports needed. And we're seeing some progress, but we'll continue to work throughout this school year to maximize retention.
Now, switching gears, within the collective bargaining agreement, there's language that speaks about how schools are supposed to respect teachers' planning time. Could you speak to how DCPS holds school accountable for ensuring that teachers' planning time is respected?
Yeah, it's an ongoing conversation that we've had throughout the year with the Washington Teachers Union leadership as well in our meetings. And what we've done with our principals specifically is ensure that they know all the parameters of the collective bargaining agreement, how planning time should occur, when it should occur, when it's protected. As of recently, we haven't heard any concerns in regards to teacher planning time, but there is a process for individuals to make it known if they feel like there's a violation of the contract, and we respond when those grievances come our way. But again, we haven't heard that issue recently, and we've made a concerted effort to ensure that planning time during the day and morning blocks that are dedicated to teachers and teacher protected time is maintained this school year. And this year we have a new feature of wellness days as well, which is also protected time for teachers and their wellness.
I got three more questions, okay? During this round. Now, in Ward 7, as a council member, I'm uniquely focused on making sure that we have dual language programs. And as you can imagine, Chancellor, that's a big need in Ward 7. Could you speak to what else is DCPS doing to strengthen the pipeline for immigrant educators and bilingual educators where there's still a shortage, especially in communities that really demand dual language programs?
It is a challenge. I think the goal here is to continue our work with targeted recruitment, recruiting in diverse communities and higher ed institutions where we know we can hire individuals that are bilingual, and also relying on strong university partnerships as well, where we can connect with universities that have a larger graduating class of individuals that are bilingual.
Copy.
And if I may chime in on this point,
Yes.
bilingual educators is the only subject area in which we had 0 vacancies this school year. And at last year's educator workforce convening, members of the chancellor's team put together a phenomenal presentation to help ensure that other school districts in DC were able to benefit from the work that DCPS is doing, specifically to attract, recruit, retain, and sustain their bilingual educators. So we are thrilled that this year we are not seeing challenges in retaining bilingual educators or in filling those critical roles.
Comprende. Based on current data trends, could you speak to what specific retention goals you guys have in mind over the next 3 years, specifically in Ward 7 as it relates to special education teachers and early career educators?
Yeah, so we want to continue the progress that we made. As I said earlier, I think a 3.8% increase in Ward 7 is pretty significant. We do want to close some of the equity gaps that you mentioned earlier in terms of retention not being consistent across the city. So that's a focus for us. And then recruiting that is intentional so that many of our vacancies can be filled, and the types of professional learning experiences and working conditions teachers have, so that when we recruit them, they're more likely to stay with us.
All right, and my final question, obviously I do appreciate the work of our education divisions, but obviously you guys can't do it alone. As a council, that's where we come into play. My final question is, could you speak to what legislative, budgetary, or policy changes would most meaningfully impact educator retention in the district from your perspective?
Yeah, it's a great question. I think Mayor Bowser and the council and city leadership has been very generous with the types of resources that public education is receiving in the city. And so I think that needs to continue to be prioritized, especially going into the upcoming budget season for fiscal year 27. And I think the commitment to our teachers and the way that we've compensated them is also, I think, a priority that should be maintained as we think about not only this year, but future fiscal years as well.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember. Councilmember Truman.
Thank you very much, Chairman Mendelson. I have to say, I love it that Councilmember Felder asked a whole bunch of the questions that I was going to ask, although don't think I don't have a whole lot of other questions that I'm going to ask. On the numbers, one of the things that I am struck by, one is there's the bump in 2019, 2020, but am I right in thinking that that's partly related to COVID, that that's the year that COVID hit, and so you shouldn't be surprised to have higher retention in that year?
That is correct. You want to speak to it?
But I'm happy to speak to this. It's actually an area where we've spent a lot of time as a jurisdiction, and it's one of the reasons why I really appreciate this council's interest in really understanding these data. This is not the type of thing that happens across the country routinely in other states, which is one of the reasons why cross-jurisdiction comparisons can be so incredibly challenging and frustrating. In 2019, 2020, OSSI did not yet have a census educator data collection. Instead, what we had was an opt-in data collection. So our LEAs, and we had more than 80% of our LEAs opted into a data collection that was collected by a third party, a vendor that we worked with, TNTP, to collect and report those data. We first collected census data in fall of 2020. And so prior to that, those data are not actually comprehensive and not a complete description of our educator workforce, which is why it's incredibly meaningful that we are at the highest rate in the last 5 years, because it is only for 5 years that we have been collecting as a jurisdiction comprehensive citywide data from every DC LEA. And so the 2019-2020 was attributed to not yet having a complete census data collection. Then there was a bump in 2020, 2021, and that's the bump that we attribute to the pandemic period. We know it's true that teachers, just like any individuals, are subject to macroeconomic forces. And when there are times of upheaval and economic uncertainty, we see higher rates of not just teachers staying in their role and in their profession, but of any individual staying in their role in their profession.
Okay, so that's helpful to understand the data. It sort of takes away a kudo that I was going to offer, which is going back 10 years, the change looks pretty significant, where you had 28% turnover in 2014-15 at the teacher level in the school, and 18% for principals. And today, 10 years later, that level of turnover is down 40%, 40+%, which is, we need to do better, but that feels significant to me.
Thank you for that, council member. And it's not the case that those data are not meaningful. It's just that they are not wholly representative. Instead, what we had in a decade ago was a coalition of the willing, and it was most LEAs. This is a challenge and an issue where our educators, our school leaders, our LEA leaders are as passionate as any individual sitting in this room in understanding these data. And so many of our LEAs raised their hands and offered up their data to be part of that data collection, but it was not until fall of 2020 that we had a census data collection that included every LEA.
I hear, and I guess I think the ones that come forward and are the most enthusiastic probably are performing the best. So it wouldn't be surprised if the numbers for the non-respondents were not as good. In any case, you have complete data, and it is not good enough. It's never going to be zero. It shouldn't be zero, but we can do better than where we're at. Go ahead.
Just quickly to note that the data for DCPS is accurate. So if you look at the decade spectrum and the progress.
So that is, so DCPS, these changes are over a 10-year period, a 40% reduction in turnover for teachers, and I think a 45% reduction in turnover for principals over that 10-year period. And that's a complete census of the DCPS data, which I think deserves acknowledgement, even as you say, we got to do better still. One question, another data question for you is, how would a teacher who had an H-1B visa and then didn't, or was hoping to get an H-1B visa to stay, and then they left, would they be in the pool of teachers who left, who part of the turnover?
Yes, so it wouldn't be documented on why they left, but it would be baked into the numbers that teacher's no longer with the district.
Okay, so one way to lower the number might be that H-1B program. And I am curious, Councilmember Felder asked about dual language. And what is your thinking about the H-1B program as a way of filling these kinds of positions and retaining teachers, it does seem like this is a thing that adds to the diversity of our schools, brings all different kinds of perspectives. How are you thinking about that now?
Yeah, I think it can be one of several strategies to help us in diversity of our workforce. We are continuing to support educators with the H-1B visa process, but as you know, it is a much slower process and has changed significantly and is evolving as we speak. So we recognize that it may not be the resource that it has been for us in the past. For example, there's been recent talks, I don't know how final it is, that some countries are now even excluded from the H-1B visa process. So I think, again, it allows us to diversify our workforce. We were very interested in exploring and piloting a green card process to support teachers with permanent residency. We're still supporting that initial cohort that we piloted, but it is an area where, you know, the landscape is changing, and we'll continue to kind of reevaluate how it can be helpful or not.
Okay, I would really encourage you to focus on this, one, for what it does for us, and two, because in this environment, encouraging that sort of thing, I think is a positive thing as an overall message about what the district stands for. I was heartened, Chancellor Farabee, in your testimony that one of the things you talked about was working conditions, and there's a lot that falls under working conditions. I have 2.5 minutes. I'm not going to get into it quite yet, but I was very struck yesterday at the hearing, the way that all of the people spoke about what it is that works to retain teachers. And I felt like it's a very different conversation today than it was when I first engaged on education things 15, 20 years ago. But I'll come back to that. I'm going to start with something specific, which is flexible scheduling. And Ms. Ross, I think you are doing, well, a dual question here. So generally, as you gather the data, you look at the data, to what extent do you do analyses of the outlier data and what might be going on underneath in the LEAs or the schools that are outlier data where turnover is higher? So that's one piece of it. And then the second piece of it is you're doing this study about flexible scheduling, which is one of those working condition things. Can you speak to what you're learning about that and when we can expect to see reports on what's happening in that space?
Thank you so much. So in direct response to your first question, to what extent do we analyze the data that we collect? The extent is significant. So our primary responsibility is collecting the data and ensuring its accuracy, and then making it publicly available, because we know that these data are meaningful to different individuals for different purposes and have different use cases for different individuals for different purposes. But quickly following that, after collecting and analyzing and making those data public, we actually do use them. We use them to drive programming. We look carefully at where we're seeing differences or outliers, even as the upward trajectory of our data are clear and tell a very compelling story across our educational ecosystem.
And including a qualitative analysis, like this school's 10% has 10% higher turnover. What's happening there? What might explain that? Are you doing that kind of analysis?
We absolutely are. We're doing it first and most importantly when we look at our subject area vacancies, because we want to be sure that we're working and supporting our educator preparation providers. Those entities preparing our future teachers are mindful of those data when they're making determinations about class size and enrollment and those areas where they need to prepare their teachers. We're also doing those analyses when we determine the subject areas for our OSSE apprenticeship and teaching program. Those are investments that the city has making in individuals to prepare them for subject areas where we have higher vacancy rates. And I should note that as a jurisdiction, we have incredibly low vacancy rates. Fewer than 2% of our teacher positions are vacant this school year, and that's with a class size, an average class size ratio of 11:1 that we see as very stable across subject areas, across wards. The only outlier in that class size ratio is for our adult education campuses, and we think that makes sense given what we know about adult learners. So for our individual schools where we see higher rates of teacher vacancies, we make sure that they have access to the same professional learning that is available to all of our schools. But we want those touch points to be available and to be meaningful for those schools. We also want our LEAs and our citywide partners to have access to those data, which is why we really prioritize the transparent publication.
And flexible scheduling and your study of flexible scheduling?
Our study of flexible scheduling is complete. It's in the final stages of review, and we're excited to deliver it to this council in the coming weeks. We have really appreciated the opportunity to work closely with the 6 LEAs that have received those flexible scheduling grants, and are perhaps even more excited to hear from LEAs across the city, including DC Prep, who presented yesterday on some of the flexibilities that they're currently implementing with their UPSFF dollars. So we think it's really, really exciting to be in a jurisdiction where our student to staff, our student to teacher ratio is 11:1. Our student to staff ratio is 5:1, which means currently today, our LEAs have the opportunity to engage in flexible schedules, and we know that many of them are. So we're excited to share more with the council about that work in the final report.
Thank you. You want me to keep going?
You missed your chance. There will be another round. So I'm going to continue with the vein of schools that have poor attendance. Roughly how many schools are there, DCPS and public charter school? I'm looking at you, Ms. Ross.
253 schools, 117 are DCPS, and the remainder are public charter schools.
Give me a second since I'm into math today. So of the bottom 14% in terms of highest turnover, meaning they have the highest turnover, 10 of the DCPS schools are in that. It's not a quartile, quintile, it's not a quintile, a sextile. There are 10 DCPS schools. And I'd kind of like to know why the turnover rate is so high and what DCPS is doing about it. So at the bottom of the list is minor, 51% retention last year or this year compared to last year. They lost half their teachers. Chancellor, what is DCPS doing?
So as I mentioned earlier, Chairman, we have a intensive approach to our schools that are most challenged with retention. We look each year to see where are our bottom numbers as relates to retention, and we target support specifically to those schools. As I mentioned earlier, 13 of the 15 schools that we target made progress. As you mentioned, a lot of times the numbers are influenced by principal transitions, which is something we're thinking through of how do we support schools when there is a transition with the principal. But we have been piloting and we have been implementing a program called Teacher Upbeat. Teach Upbeat is a support to schools where there's a stipend that schools can use to support retention. There's
I
coaching.
would like to know more specifically with minor, but you mentioned that you target schools that had low retention one year to improve their retention the following year. So minor's retention rate this year was 51%. Last year it was 51%. let's take Excel Academy. Their retention rate this year was 60%. Last year, their retention rate was 61%. So I know Miners had a lot of turnover in principals. How many principals in the last 5 years?
Last 5 years, I think 2. At Minor,
I think I've heard it's more like 5 or 6.
you said 5 years?
Yeah.
It's 5 or 6? Yeah, that doesn't sound right, but I'll check that number.
Maybe someone in your staff could.
Yeah,
Check
I think there
quickly.
may be
At
some
any rate-
interim transitions that are baked
Well,
into
that would count.
Yeah.
So, in any event, let's talk about Minor. What is DCPS doing to improve the retention rate at Minor?
So we have worked directly with Principal Brocard and one of the schools that receive our intensive supports. And one of the ways we look at supports for school is, one, what is the insight data saying? What is the feedback from educators around the types of working condition and professional learning experiences they're experiencing there? And then we work with the principal to strategize around that.
Well, it doesn't seem to be working at Minor. Let me use a different example. Truesdale. Now, Truesdale's not in the bottom 36, but Truesdale, their turnover rate from school year 2021 to 21-22 was 46%. The next year, 72%. Excuse me, I don't mean turnover, retention. The next year, 72%. Okay, so improved from 46 to 72. Stayed at 72% for 2 years. School year 23-24 to school year 24-25 dropped to 49%, pretty much where it was 3 years earlier. This year, the retention rate went up, pretty much where it was 2 years earlier, this up and down. So what's going on there? If you're working with the school to improve retention, doesn't seem to be any consistency with Truesdale.
Well, at Truesdale, we've seen an increase within school retention over the past 2 years. Again, there's still more work to do, but we have seen some progress.
Do you think that's a satisfactory answer? So I asked him about Minor. You're focusing on Minor. You're looking at, your first answer was you're looking at schools that have high turnover or low retention, and you're trying to get resources there to improve where they are. So I pointed out 2 schools where that just hasn't happened, the worst being Minor. And so then you got more specific about getting into the school, but I point out to Truesdale where there's just no consistency.
What I'm pointing out, of the last 2 years, you see improvements in their retention rate. So I'm not sure about your comment about lack of consistency.
Let's see, 2020 to 2021, excuse me, 2020, yes, to 2020 to 2021, 46%, improved to 72%, great. That should be the end of the story, except 23 to 24, it dropped to 49%, exactly where it had been 3 years earlier. This is a yo-yo.
Yeah, but if you look at year over year, they're at 71.8 and they were at 53%.
From last year to this year, how do I know that that yo-yo isn't going to just repeat itself since it did previously? That's my point with regard to Truesdale. I'm not seeing consistency here. I'm not seeing that whatever efforts you're putting into the school with Minor is working at all, with Excel is working at all, with Truesdale is not being maintained.
Yeah, there's still more work to do in several of our schools, but if you look at the system as a whole, you see overall progress across the district. And if you look at the schools that have been challenged with lower retention rates, you do see improvement. So I understand that you're pointing out specific examples of schools where there's either been highs and lows that haven't been consistent improvement, or schools that have struggled with retention. I think a lot of that, as I mentioned earlier, an example you gave with Minor is related to transition with school leadership. But overall, if you look at the system, we see marked improvement. as I highlighted in testimony, and again, I'll share, is that there's still work to be done in DCPS and there's still room for improvement.
Yes, I appreciate that. But this line of questioning is getting at not the system overall, not the average overall, but particular schools. So if Truesdale just had a 30% turnover year after year after year, I realize some of those could be the same positions, but at some point, 30% plus 30% plus 30% plus 30% equals 100%. That's not stable for the school at all. 30% is not acceptable. You would agree 30% is not acceptable, but it's gone from 46 to 70 to 72, back to 49.
But I think it's, not, if you're
Well, I
asking
just
my
wanna
perspective,
know-
not all attrition is bad. If you look at a school like Truesdale, I would bet that you look at the effective and highly effective teachers, that retention rate is high.
Has there been principal turnover at Truesdale?
There hasn't been principal turnover at Truesdale.
All right, so it feels to me like you're kind of guessing that it's just a lot of bad teachers, which I find a little hard to believe that it's bad teachers. Get rid of 30% of them one year, the next year we get rid of 50% of them, 54% of them. The next year we get rid of 28% of them. That sounds kind of like a guess. Hold on a second. You have thoughts? I might just.
While you're deliberating, did confirm that 100% of Truesdale's highly effective teachers were retained. So my guess is correct. Again, I think if we talk about attrition, I just think it's important to consider that not all attrition is bad attrition. And I know that's not a satisfying answer to you.
It is not a
But that's the
satisfying.
reality.
It's not a satisfactory reason for two reasons. One, we can't be endlessly getting rid of underperforming teachers. There can't be that many underperforming teachers. And second of all, as you know, there are serious criticisms, credible criticisms of the evaluation process, which can be very subjective and sometimes is weaponized. You certainly have heard that said, that it's weaponized to get rid of teachers that a principal doesn't like. This hearing is about teacher retention. I could put it differently. This hearing is about school stability. And the answer to school stability can't be, well, we are year after year after year getting rid of bad teachers. That's not a stable school. There is I'm going to say a companion to this hearing, which we've had a couple of this fall, which is about academic achievement. You don't get academic achievement with high turnover. I think you would agree. That's certainly what all the experts say. You don't get academic achievement with high turnover. This hearing is not about academic achievement. It is about stability or turnover, what we're doing to reduce turnover. There are 10 schools that had turnover, 10 DCPS schools that had turnover of at least 1/3 of their teachers from last year to this year. That is very high. I'll repeat again what I said earlier, the last round, that the national average just in general is somewhere around 10% or 9%. I forget what I'd said exactly. There are a number of different indicators that suggest that at 18% or 17% turnover, that is too high. You've said it's too high. But these schools like Minor is not doing well academically. I remember that from our academic achievement hearing. It's not doing well academically. You don't remember how many principals have been there, but I have been told that there's been almost an annual change in.
Well, I
in
think you were
principals at
calculating
Minor.
in interim principal.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, but I think you continue to quote the data around national average, and that does not include school within a school. So we can't fluctuate back from what nationally is compared when we're looking at if teachers stayed within a school year over year. If you look at DCPS, the overall retention is 90%. I think that's the number you need to use when you start comparing us to other districts. Are there schools that have been challenged with teacher retention? Absolutely. But we're talking about maybe 10 schools out of 117. You ask, how do we support schools that have been challenged with retention issues? And I've described those supports. I've also shared with you, in most cases, the retention rates in those schools have improved year over year. Has it improved in all schools? No. What do we do about that? We provide more support to those schools and those principals to try to improve those retention rates.
So this committee cares about the kids at Minor. We don't just care about all 117 schools.
Absolutely.
We care about the kids at Minor. The kids at Minor,
We care about the students at Truesdale as well. We want
and
to
they're
make sure
being
that.
held back academically because of the turnover in school
But-
leadership, the turnover in teaching.
But let's look
teaching
at the
staff.
but let's look at the results of achievement at Truesdale, right? So let's play out this assumption that because of their retention, students at that school aren't performing well academically. That's the assumption, correct?
They could be performing better, and my guess is that they don't come close to some of the schools in Ward 3.
They had a double-digit increase in their ELA scores, and they had a math increase of 7% year.
So
over
how
year.
many students were proficient in math?
I don't have the proficiency number, but
Oh, I don't-
I will tell
The
you.
growth is from,
I will tell you, if you look at other schools, that's not consistent across the district. So we can't just look at the actual proficiency rate. Our schools improving student performance year over year.
Chancellor, I care about growth because that is a measure of the quality of teaching.
I'm
But I
giving
also
those are
care-
math numbers.
But I also care about the number of students who are proficient. So we know the achievement gap between white students and students of color is somewhere around 60 points. So if we go from proficient at 10% to proficient at 17%, huge growth. Still way, way, way too low.
Right, but I'm
But that's
replying
not-
to this assumption that if there's retention, that students in that school aren't making academic progress.
I define academic progress in two ways, and at the moment, the way I define it is how many kids are proficient. If the number of kids who are just, I'm using these numbers, 10% grows to 17%, that's still 83% who are not proficient. I care about that.
As we do as well, again, I think the
So
assumption that there
this-
isn't academic progress when there's changes in retention, I just don't think that's an accurate.
What
assumption.
specifically is happening at Minor? What specifically is DC Central doing? What specifically is the instructional superintendent doing to turn things around at Minor, both in terms of teacher retention, principal retention, and academic achievement?
Again, as I shared earlier, Principal Brokar is incredibly focused on improving instruction. But I also know that she has high expectations for the educators in that building. And sometimes those expectations don't align to the individuals that have previously been in the building. And I think that's been played out in their results. But for this year and previous years, the types of professional learning experiences, the working conditions that educators have been the areas of focus, and we solicit feedback. What are the supports that teachers need to ensure that they can thrive in the classroom? A good example, concrete example is Minor, is there was a request for additional supports with logistics because Minor has two separate buildings where there's logistical support needed. So there was a position that was hired to support both buildings so that teachers can focus on teaching and learning. This is one clear example of the feedback we received and the work that looks different there at Minor. And we're committed to continue to analyze the data and solicit feedback from teachers on how we can improve the working conditions, not just at Minor, but across the district.
But my question was about minor.
Yep.
Councilmember Fruman. Sorry, I was just going to keep going. I was,
I'm heartened that you were aware that you were over your time. I'm sorry, Chancellor, did you have something you wanted to say?
Oh, no, I saw Councilmember Parker, but no, thank you, Councilmember. I do want to pause and thank you for your acknowledgement earlier. I know that our central services team has been working hard alongside our school leaders to think about, to strategize and plan for, the supports needed based on the feedback of our teachers to make the type of progress that you recognize. Obviously, again, more room for improvement.
Well, thank you for that. I do think, I think it is important to acknowledge the trend. And yesterday's hearing, there was an enormous amount of talk about culture and work conditions and things like that. And I hear you talking about low-performing teachers who may leave, and there's an element of that, and that is appropriate in some settings, but it's not the whole issue. And I hope you don't think it's the whole issue. I also think, like, when you look at the schools with the highest turnover rates of the lowest 25, the vast majority of them are in the charter sector. And so where there is a situation where an individual school has a challenge, I do think it is super appropriate for you to dial in as well as you can to try to improve that landscape and not assume it's just because of teacher quality. There's different things that are at work here. And I think you acknowledge it. I worry about that slipping away in this conversation. I think it's super important to stay focused on working conditions and things like that. Chairman Mendelson has had a whole bunch of really great hearings. The hearings on bold schools where there were, we looked at the schools with the greatest success. There were some of them where there was a lot of turnover and then there was significant improvement. So the scenario that you're describing, like, that can happen. But again, working conditions are super important, and let's not lose the focus on that. And I hope you won't get defensive. I think you have every reason to hold your head up and say, we're making real progress. And in the places where it's resistant to progress, we're determined to make more progress.
Yeah, that's certainly true. And we recognize there are some schools that have improved, but that's not the case for all of them. And I don't want to imply that that's solely related to underperformance, but it is a factor among many. But I agree. I not only lean towards the working condition, but I also believe the professional development experience and supports, even the changes that we made to our curriculum. Is it more intuitive? Is it teacher friendly? Does it allow the teacher to be at their best? I mean, those are all considerations and things that make a difference, and whether or not a teacher decides that they want to continue to work in DCPS and ultimately a school. Now, what we haven't spent time talking about is also the investments in the school leader, because a lot of times school leadership can be a driving force and a factor for teacher retention within the school, which we spent a lot of time talking about today. And we think about a lot in terms of school leadership, their development, and the way in which they lead that supports a culture of high teacher retention.
I'm grateful to hear you say that, because at the Bold Schools hearing and yesterday, what we were hearing so uniformly was the importance of the leader, the importance of a culture of collaboration, the importance of a sense of empowerment for teachers and supports in different sorts of ways. And it's never going to be zero. It's 17 turnover now outside of the school, 10 outside of the system. It's never going to be zero, but we want to drive it as low as possible. So there's more work to be done. And it takes me back to the working conditions stuff. One of the things, and Ms. Ross, I think that you have said in the past that you might provide guidance to schools that teachers are allowed to use sick days for mental health as mental health days. And I wonder if you can speak to whether you have provided that guidance. I think I feel maybe today I need a mental health day. And so what's happening in terms of that phenomenon?
Thanks so much for this question. When we've talked about this issue in the past, we expressed interest in exploring and better understanding what was happening across our DC LEAs and whether there were situations where teachers were being denied the use of sick leave because they were requesting mental health sick leave. OSSE's position continues to be that health includes mental health. And so there is no distinction between requiring a sick day or having a mental health doctor's appointment and a dentist appointment or an eye doctor's appointment. We have not issued guidance because we have not heard that there is a need for guidance. And we have also heard that issuing specific guidance that would require a teacher or an individual, a school-based staff person, to disclose why they needed to be taking sick leave could actually have a chilling effect on an individual requesting that sick leave.
So I just want to be clear in my own mind. What I'm talking about when I say a mental health day is somebody who says, I just need a break. And if I take a day off, I'm going to be better for the next 3 weeks. So maybe that's answered by your not requiring explanation and being open to the idea of folks taking sick leave for a mental health purpose that might not necessarily be an appointment.
Well, I think this is where both the work that DCPS has done around having specific teacher wellness days is potentially very instructive for this conversation. I think the other thing that we are continually thinking about and working with our LEAs on at OSSE is student attendance. And we know that there is a non-de minimis relationship between student attendance and teacher attendance. We hear anecdotally and we see in the data that students are less likely to show up when their teacher of record is not present because they want to engage in that learning with their teacher of record. And so as a jurisdiction, we are really focused on making sure that the conditions are optimal for student learning, which means having our teachers in classrooms when school instruction is happening. And it's one of the reasons why each LEA, including DCPS, has a school calendar, and it's incumbent upon the LEA leaders, the educators in the case of DCPS, along with the teachers' representatives, the WTU, to come up with a calendar that includes opportunities for teachers, other school-based staff to have time away from the classroom, away from the demands of the students. And I think we see a great example of that in the innovations that DCPS has put in place with its teacher wellness days actually built into the school calendar. So this means that teachers have a day away from their students where they don't have to interrupt student learning.
Okay. I'm not sure that I got the answer that I was hoping for, but you answered the question. I don't want to use all of my time on it, but part of it pivots to a related question, which is dedicated substitutes. And it was very interesting, and maybe this goes to Chancellor Farabee. Yesterday, I asked the different LEA leaders, how do you deal with substitutes? And the they were proud of having dedicated substitutes in their schools. How is DCPS thinking about this question of dedicated substitutes? It does seem like one of those things that can increase flexibility for teachers, but also would have a real benefit to consistently having people in the school who had relationships with kids. So where are you on this dedicated substitutes question?
Yeah, great question, Councilmember Fruitman. So we do provide central service support for all teacher vacancies and absences so that there's a substitute. When we were coming out of the pandemic, we did hear this request for an option to have a school-based substitute, as you described. Some schools enjoy having someone around every day. What we found is when it was a district-wide strategy, sometimes those individuals would be used intermittently, and there wasn't always a need to have someone there every day. So we give schools the option to build that into their resource plan for the year when they receive their allocation. We currently have, out of 117 schools, we have 43 building subs currently. So a good number of DCPS schools are utilizing that strategy as a way to deal with teacher vacancies and absences.
So hear you, and this goes to the focus of resources on schools that are struggling the most. And it might be that I'm not into the minor data in the same way, but if minor were struggling both in terms of turnover and performance, then more and more support from central, I would think, would be an appropriate thing. And even if the school could not afford in its budget dedicated substitutes, maybe there's a way for you to do it. So this goes to overall real progress. Where there's issues, need for a real focus. So does Central ever, in a setting like that, what do you do in a setting where teacher turnover is very high and performance is not improving? What do you do?
I think the intensive support I mentioned earlier is where we lean in heavily. In a minute, I'll turn to Dr. Bay because I know her team has been really focused on this. I don't think the minor situation in Truesdale are exactly the same. And I think minor is a place where we had a lot of transition and we also have underperformance. We don't see the type of gains we see at a school like Truesdale. And so that's where we really lean in with the school leader, the instructional superintendent, and our cluster supports. And if a school ever needed, let's say we think we need this and we can't build it into our budget, that's when we ask them to make budget requests. And each budget season, we look at all the requests. And one of the considerations is need and academic performance. We prioritize those schools that have additional requests that they can't fund in their allocation. But I'll turn to Dr. Bay to speak a little bit more about the intensity of support that we provide for a school like Minor.
Yes, thank you, Chancellor, and thank you for the question. Minor is one of our intensive schools. We have 13 schools that we're providing targeted intensive support. And when I think about Minor, we're providing support, direct coaching and support on the ground as it relates to ELA, math, their MTSS structures and ensuring that they have proper structures for reviewing student data, as well as safety and belonging. So there's a lot of central service support as well as an intentional focus by the instructional superintendent in order to support the principal with the retention of teachers, the building of capacity of teachers that are in the building, as well as moving the building forward from a student outcome standpoint.
All right. Did you want to say something?
No, I was just going to clarify. MTSS is our multi-tier system of support, which is where we tier the supports that students receive either with behavior or academic needs that they may have.
Okay, great. I see Chairman Mendelson in the audience, so I kept going, but I see Councilmember Parker on my screen, so I will take the prerogative to turn it over to Councilmember Parker. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Fruitman. And it's good to see you all. Ms. Ross, I wanted to start with you. Do you have any insights into the relatively low retention rates for DRS or the Department of Youth Rehabilitation Services?
Thanks so much for this question, Councilmember Parker, and it's great to see you as well. Our DYRS schools are serving a unique population, and we know that that population requires specific supports, and that those supports can be very time intensive and emotionally intensive for our teachers to provide. I believe that our retention rates for those population of students are not atypically low nationally, and it is an area where we have been trying to be thoughtful and working in particular with our 13 approved educator preparation programs by ensuring that our new teachers coming into the profession that are interested in working with our DYRS schools have the opportunity to complete student teaching in those environments so that they may be best prepared in order to succeed and sustain in those environments. I think you are right to call it out as an area of challenge and unique need. And it's something that we're thinking about from the pre-service perspective so that our new and incoming teachers have the opportunity for exposure to our DYRS environments and to determine whether if that's a path that they would like to pursue in their teaching profession, that they have an opportunity to get the training and support that they will need on the front end so that by the time they are serving those students, they are able to meet their needs.
As the chair of the council's Committee on Youth Affairs, which has oversight of DRS, this is something I've been laser focused on. I want to give a shout out to the chairman. He too has leaned in on this. I see it very clearly as a matter of rehabilitation. And so when we're talking about rehabilitation for young people at DRS, we have to focus on education. I invite you and the rest of the team at OSSE to be a part of the ongoing conversations between Maya Angelou, who is the provider there, and the agency to think about how do we hit the right balance. Yes, retention is one factor, but just making sure that we're providing a quality education for the young people in the care of DRS is really important. And so I will follow up, but want us to collectively keep an eye on what's happening there.
I agree,
Relate.
Councilmember Parker. Oh, and we'll just note, we have had really productive conversations in ensuring that all of our DYRS educators have access to all of the supports on our learning management system. We know that great teachers stay in the profession when they are able to be successful with their students. And we're really excited by the interest and engagement, particularly around some of our high quality offerings in literacy and in math for our teachers serving our DYRS students. I fully agree and am excited about continuing the conversation with you and your team.
Well, I will just say this, pay is a big factor. And the teachers at Maya serving students at DRS are not receiving comparable pay as educators in either of our other sectors. And so while that's not something singly you can fix, I think that is an opportunity for us if we're really serious about retention. I did want to ask also about how we define retention. So as OSSE is kind of working across LEAs, is there a unified definition of how we are defining retention from LEA to LEA?
Yeah, thanks so much for this question. There sure is. We cut the data a number of different ways because we know that it has different use cases for different individuals, and individuals are interested in it for different purposes. So first, we think about within school, within role retention. That's Elizabeth Ross is a third grade teacher at Simon Elementary in the 24-25 school year. She returns to her third grade role in the 25-26 school year. I would be considered a stayer. That is that within school, within role retention rate. Next, we think about changers. These are individuals who are still in the educational ecosystem, but are changing roles and maybe changing schools. So that this is Elizabeth Ross is a third grade teacher in Simon Elementary in the 24-25 school year, moves to an instructional coach role at Simon Elementary or at another school in that school year. So I'm continuing to serve our students, but I'm doing so in a different role. Next, we have movers. These are individuals who stay in their same role, but move to a different school within a system. And that role could be within the same sector, so within DCPS or within our charter sector, or it could be across sector. So this could be, an example of this would be Elizabeth Ross, third grade teacher, moves from a third grade role in DCPS to a third grade role in Friendship.
Got it. Got it. Something I will follow up on is just how is that translating to LEAs and how they're both supporting teachers, but also defining them. I'm glad that OSSI is thinking in that way. I'm not clear that all LEAs have the same metrics for how they are defining a teacher and how they are retained from year to year. I see the clock ticking, so I wanted to come to the Chancellor. It's good to see you.
Good to see you. Thank you.
I know over years we've talked, one of the priorities you flagged is around mentorship and teacher induction being used as an opportunity. Can you just flag any substantive changes that have been made to the teacher induction and or mentoring and how that might vary for different stages of tenure? So a first-year teacher versus a 5-year teacher, for instance.
Yeah, I'm happy to give some context. I also allow Dr. Beta to shift as well. I think the big change for us has been we did a lot of work remotely, and teachers have said we really like to have mentoring sessions in person. If I want to be coached, we want those to be in-person experiences. And so we shifted a lot of our development opportunities and coaching to in-person. And there's also been requests for in-school and potentially out-of-school supports for teachers. So for example, you may have a first grade teacher that wants support from a teacher in another building. And so we work with our instructional superintendents to provide that level of support, especially if we have what we call singletons. So I am the only pre-K 3 teacher in my building. If I want to collaborate and learn from another pre-K 3 teacher, I would like to be able to have access to someone. So we have done a better job, I think, of coordinating those types of experiences in alignment with what our teachers have said they want from us. But the emphasis, I believe, has been on providing as much as we can in supports for teachers and coaching in person.
And is that mandatory or voluntary? Like, do I raise my hand to say I want this mentorship relationship, or am I forced to do it?
Yeah, there's the standard opportunities that everybody receives. And then similar to what we do for our students, we tier our supports based on need, but a teacher certainly could raise their hand and say, I like to, or I need additional support. And oftentimes we hear that directly through their principal. And the principal can either coordinate that or our central services team will support the principal and identify. So say, for example, a principal says, hey, my teacher wants to connect with another pre-K 4 teacher. We will help identify someone who has the skill set, the expertise and experiences to provide that type of support.
I got it. I'm channeling my former colleague from the state board, Fraser O'Leary, and he would just say, teacher mentorship is a huge lever for whether a teacher is successful, but also whether they stay. So I wanted to give him a shout out because I know that's been a priority for him for years. I did want to.
It's true.
Yes. I wanted to come in my remaining time to your teacher evaluation and not to debate whether or not to have one, but I do recall years ago there was a promise that you made to evaluate it, look at it, think through what changes, tweaks needed to be made to the evaluation tool, as we have repeatedly annually heard from teachers that it serves as a key reason why teachers are leaving the classroom or pushed out of the classroom. Where are we today, and or what is your current thinking about how changes to impact, not whether or not we have an evaluation tool, but changes could keep teachers in the classroom?
Yeah, so we did do that comprehensive review. We made adjustments. We made adjustments to the scoring tools. We also made changes to the rubric. We also made adjustments to the types of professional development that's required for principals, especially around bias, which is one of the areas that we heard that there was a concern that there needed to be more training to deal with bias for school leaders. I view it as a continuous improvement effort, and we look at data every year to determine what adjustments need to be made. And even just this year, we made adjustments to the impact model as well, and we will do that in the future.
Okay, quick. I know I'm at time, but quick follow-up. Do you have data that you can share that cross-references impact evaluation with teacher retention per school or at a macro level?
We do. So we can share, for example, where teachers fall in the categories within their impact evaluation and cross-reference that with retention. I will say that we do see teachers that have lower ratings. Most of those teachers do make progress across DCPS. So let's say you're developing, we see a lot of developing teachers move into effective. Many teachers move from effective to highly effective. So most teachers in DCPS over time do improve their performance. And as we see performance improve, we often see teacher retention improve as well.
Okay, that is my time for this round. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember. Chancellor, when I asked you last round about minor, I think you mentioned Teach Upbeat is one of the strategies for helping a school with high turnover.
It is.
Teach Upbeat is a contract that the DCPS has?
No, it is. It's a partnership. I'll let Dr. Bay speak a little bit to the partnership. It's a way in which we can focus our resources on schools that have challenges. I should say it's a contracted partnership, but it
So it is a
provides-
contract.
Yeah, so
Alright.
it does
Don't
provide.
use up all my time if she's going to say what you're saying.
No, she's got more insight. I'll stop there.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to piggyback off of that, the program provides additional coaching and support to the school leadership team, specifically around digging into their data to determine what may be contributing to their teacher retention and what to do about that. So whether it is the recruitment of teachers, the continual coaching of teachers in the moment, receiving feedback from teachers using the data that we have available, whether it is Insight, Panorama, our Power Practice tool that we use with teachers in order to get additional feedback throughout the year. Upbeat has protocols and tools that they use with those leadership teams in order to dig into that data so that they are able to respond to the needs of teachers in real time to hopefully increase the retention rates of teachers in their building.
Is Teach Upbeat the only contract that you have for this purpose?
I believe currently, yes.
All right, can you, after the hearing, follow up with and give us the cost of the contract, how many years you've had the contract, and a list of the schools where Teach Upbeat has been deployed, and give me the turnover history, the teacher and principal turnover in each of those schools. I'm assuming we're not talking about very many years, so I'll say the year prior to their going to the school and then each year they've been in the school. So let's just take minor. So Teach Upbeat, and I'm kind of making this up, was deployed to minor in school year 23-24. So turnover data for 22-23 plus each year since then. So a list of all the schools with that information plus the cost of the contract.
We're happy to provide that information. Just as a summary, it is new, relatively, but we had 10 schools and 80% of those schools had at least 9 percentage points or more increase in their retention rate. But we'll provide all the details that you've requested.
Okay, well, I'm still stuck on minor, which went from 51% retention to 51% retention.
Chairman, I will say about minor, I mean, minor is one of our schools of focus across the board, both for retention as well as student outcomes. And so the urgency that I hear from you is the same urgency that we have as it relates to supporting minor to make sure that minor gets back on track, both from a retention standpoint as well as student outcomes.
I hope so, and I appreciate your saying that, because I'm a strong believer that stability is important, stability in the budget, which is not the subject of today's hearing, and stability with the school leader who's putting together or leading the school community, and stability with the teaching force. I want to say teaching faculty, building the community and building one year to the next, as opposed to starting over every year. So I appreciate your saying that. According to recently released OSSE data, 31% of educators district-wide and 26% within DCPS with 0 to 1 years of experience switched schools. This turnover rate is higher than for educators with more years of experience. At yesterday's hearing, we heard about various supports for new teachers. What is the district doing to strengthen these supports and ensure greater consistency and stability in our schools, or to phrase it differently, to reduce the turnover rate with new teachers? Who wants to go first?
I'm happy to kick us off, and then, of course, welcome DCPS chiming in. I know they've put in place a number of specific supports. We think about this starting from before our teachers are in the classroom. In recent years, we've invested deeply in the work that we're doing to support the institutions preparing our future teachers, our educator preparation providers, and we're thinking about ensuring that our future teachers have high quality instructional experiences in their classrooms. In particular, we've made deep investments in ensuring that all new teachers are trained in the science of reading at the preparation program level, so that when they enter the classroom on day one, they have those knowledge and skills that they need. Additionally, we've invested deeply in our OSSE Apprenticeship and Teaching Program. This is a program under which current DC paraprofessionals, and beginning next year, we're expanding that program to a master's pathway, but currently it's DC paraprofessionals that do not yet hold a BA are pursuing coursework with UDC to enable them to secure a BA and ultimately an OSSE educator credential in three high demand areas: early childhood education, elementary education, and special education. And these individuals have on average 5 years of experience. They, upon completion of the program, they will be working as classroom teachers in the schools where they've served as paraprofessionals and where they're doing their training. And so we're very, very excited. Research suggests that programs like this can be really, really powerful in helping to ensure that new teachers are successful and also continue to choose serving our students in the schools and communities in which they're working. Additionally, we've looked across our data, and we have seen and heard from teachers' lived experiences that our special education teachers, particularly in their earlier years, are in environments where they require particularly high levels of support. And so we've created a special education teacher community of practice for our new special education teachers, which we've launched this year and are very pleased to have district educators participating in. Additionally, we've provided early career new teacher coaching to our new teachers entering the workforce, starting with those teachers who are trained here in DC. And 100% of program participants have reported satisfaction with that new teacher coaching. So those are the individuals that are providing them with guidance and support. This is an area that we're excited to continue to explore. And we also acknowledge that, very consistent with some of the other comments we've heard here today.
You do know you're using up all my time here. So that last part that you mentioned was coaching?
Correct.
Okay, because I think that's a little bit more to the point of how we're going to keep teachers.
Well, this coaching is specifically designed for new teachers. We're
Yes.
providing coaching support to teachers in years 0 to 1. And my understanding of your question, please correct me if I'm wrong, is what early career supports is OSSE providing to
Correct.
teachers.
So
So
how
we view
are,
that coaching as an early career support because it's for teachers in years 0 to 1 of the profession.
0 to 1. So how is that made available? by a grant to the school, or teachers sign up with a program that OSSI has, or how's that available?
Great question. We've contracted a leading a national vendor who provides the direct coaching support, and then we open up an application, and we have individual teachers that are applying to OSSI to take advantage of this coaching support. It's actually a support that we have had underway for the past couple of years, and we built it out from a new leader coaching model that we started during the pandemic period. So
How many
we
teachers?
at 75.
75. Okay, but do we, if I did my math correctly earlier, I think there were 900 new teachers at DCPS last year. So that's not even 10%. 10%? That's not even 10% of DCPS. Let me turn to, because I have now 49 seconds left. I have to pay attention to the clock. Chancellor? So what is DCPS doing with, to support?
Yeah, I think very similar strategy. We also solicit feedback from our beginning teachers of what we can do to best support them. We also look at data that indicates that strategies are being effective. For example, if you look at our data year over year, we did see a 4% increase in retention for beginning teachers. We believe that's attributed to, one, hiring early, and that's building a strong pool of candidates for our principals to select from, because the earlier we hire, we can make connections with those teachers, provide the professional development experiences they need over the summer, help them prepare for a strong start to the school year. The other area that we invested in is very content-specific development for new teachers. So say, for example, a teacher may say, I'm really comfortable in math, I'm less comfortable in English language arts. Can the district customize some development opportunities for me? And we have done that. The other area is around positive behavior environments in our schools and classroom management, supporting teachers where they struggle the most. Often they're new to the profession or new to DCPS. Is how do we ensure that there's consistent expectation for student behavior? And that is a focus for us across the district. With a strategy we call Power Practices, which is consistent expectations that we uphold across the building for students.
Is this through a contract or through staff at DCPS Central?
So Power Practices is internal. I'll turn to Dr. Bates. She can share a little bit more about what Power Practices is and what it means for our schools.
Yeah, thank you, Chancellor. Over the years, we have been really intentional about observing best practices across schools where we see high rates of student achievement as well as high perceptions of safety and belonging. And what we've been able to do alongside of our schools is codify what those practices are. And so when you hear the Chancellor refer to power practices, that's what we are referring to. What are those common practices that we expect to see across all 117 of our schools, and creating the tools and supports for schools to be able to implement those practices. It impacts new teachers, but it also impacts all teachers as well as students. And so an example of one of our power practices is around expectations, norms, and routines, making sure that there are established expectations, norms, and routines, not just in the classroom, but at arrival, at dismissal, when students transition to lunch, how they interact with each other, how they interact with their teachers and with their peers. And we've provided coaching and support to schools on the power practices. We have tools that schools utilize in order to monitor. They collect data not only from their teachers, but also from their students in order to monitor whether these practices are being implemented with fidelity and what are the outcomes. What is it that we're hearing from teachers as well as from the student body? And so we're in the first year of implementation of power practices across all 117 schools. We work really closely with the instructional superintendents in order to make sure schools have the appropriate coaching and support that they need. And we're seeing really positive outcomes so far in terms of implementation, but also what we hear back from teachers as well as students in terms of focusing in these areas.
And this is all in-house personnel.
This is all in-house, yes.
Hold on just a second. Yeah. Councilmember Fruman.
Thank you very much, Chairman Mendelson. Again, start by acknowledging real progress. One of the things that is following this issue over time when turnover rates are very high. It feels like either there's a problem in recruitment and we're bringing in the wrong folks, or there's a problem that should be addressed inside of the schools so we retain people more. And I get it. It's never going to go down to no turnover, but I'm focused on what are the things, and it sounds like you are too, that we can do to encourage folks to stay. I'm struck by the number 7% of our teachers stay in DCPS but leave their school. And we just heard about, I think it was like 30% of first and second year teachers move to another school. I'm very curious, and it's mostly a can you get me the data question. Where do they go from and to? If it was a bunch of teachers who went from non-Title I schools to Title I schools because they thought, oh, there's a bonus that's associated with that, or I am a person who's really committed to this, it would be one thing. If it was a migration to Ward 3, it would be a different thing. But I want to know where folks, that 7% that stays but goes to a different school, figure out a way to show us where they started from and where they went through data.
Happy to follow up on the data. Quickly, I would say that our Title I and non-Title I data is pretty consistent, right? So there's similar levels of retention and not, right? So I think it's safe to say that we see that, especially if you look at, our highly effective teachers. I do think our workforce that is younger and newer to the profession are more mobile in general. I don't think that's unique to education. And I think sometimes that's about finding the right fit for that individual. And then once they find that fit, like this is a good place that feels good, then they're more likely to, stay at that location for longer periods of time. But we also want to study more of what we can do to ensure that there are stronger numbers. I agree with you on the recruitment, and I do think it also bears true a lot when we have hard to fill areas, such as special education or bilingual educators, as mentioned earlier. And so we've been more intentional about how we hire, when we hire, so principals can hire good staff as early as possible.
No, I hear you on that, and I don't think it's a recruitment issue, which makes me think there are other issues, and I think everybody's grappling with it. I go every year when there's a reception for all of the new teachers, and it is striking how great these people are, how enthusiastic they are, how passionate they are to make a difference in the world. So I think looks to me like you're getting good people, but then we lose too many of them. So how do we keep them? That's what this conversation is about.
Finding fit is something that we see a lot. And also, you move to the area and you think you want to live in this neighborhood, and then you realize you want to live in this neighborhood, and then you want a school closer to your house. So I think that just newer teachers are just more mobile, and then once they settle, they typically stay at that one school for a longer period of time. The good news is 90% of them, most of the people do continue to stay in DCPS, and we want that too.
Yeah, I hear you on that. I mean, another kind of data that I'm curious about is sort of net migration. So we lose teachers, and we may lose teachers they leave the profession, or they go to other jurisdictions, and we attract teachers and they may come from other jurisdictions. To what extent does the data show us appearing to be an attractive place to work for teachers in the
Great, I'm
region?
glad you asked, great question. We see migration in. So I see, as Ross wants to respond as well, but we see a lot of interest from surrounding districts where individuals come to us from other districts. And a lot of it is how competitive we are and the reputation we have for our working conditions, the types of support we provide. Now, the challenge is the average salary and experience for DCPS typically increases significantly each year as well. So I think that's a good indicator when we get into budget season. You can see how that plays out. That typically when we're hiring a teacher, we're hiring teachers that have come from other districts that have experience, and that's because there's more migration in than it is more migration out.
I agree wholeheartedly with everything that the chancellor said, and will just note that the quantitative data that reinforce that this is actually the case is our incredibly low vacancy rate. So we continue to be an incredibly popular jurisdiction to teach in, especially compared to our surrounding jurisdictions. Montgomery County just reported their lowest vacancy rate ever with double-digit percentages. We're below 2% again this year. And on that question, Councilmember Fruman, of whether we see migration from higher and lower poverty schools across the jurisdiction. We did that analysis citywide last year, and we found that there is no statistically significant migration from higher or lower geographic locations based on economics across our city. So we're happy to share that analysis. It's in our educator workforce report from last year.
So I had 5 questions I hope to ask, but I mean, it is impossible. Thank you for your full answers, sort of. I want to speed date a little. My understanding is DCPS Central has moved to a thing where you need to approve professional development initiatives inside of the schools, and that can result in slowing down of getting those things done. Is it the case? I mean, one of the things that we have heard again, the Bold Schools hearing, Chairman Mendelson, thank you so much for doing that hearing. Yesterday's hearing, that empowered principals are critical. And so, and I will say, I mean, I think our teachers are amazing, but I do think our principals are unbelievable. I mean, we have great principals. To what extent do you give them autonomy to decide what kind of professional development to provide inside of their school, and to what extent is there an approval process?
Yeah, so school leaders in DCPS have, as you know, real significant autonomy around their budget. We do provide parameters ensuring that we are in alignment with the collective bargaining agreement in terms of the number of teachers and class size ratios and those things. But outside of that, there's a lot of autonomy. And in terms of the type of professional development, we want it to be customized. We want it to be tailored to the needs of the school educators, and we help principals plan for that and how to utilize their resources accordingly. So the only time that there's greater district presence in terms of the professional development are our district professional development days. And that's in our collective bargaining agreement days that DCPS provides district-wide professional development. But there are days that are school-based development days where the school leader and their teams determine what's needed, what will be provided. And then outside of that, most of professional development is driven by the school leader.
Okay, I'm not going to get all 5 done, but I want to stay inside my 10 minutes. I'm all for principal autonomy, but a different thing is making sure that planning periods and such are being provided in each of our schools. To what extent do you watch over that and make sure that teachers are getting planning periods in all of the schools in the portfolio?
A lot, because it was a concern that was raised by the Washington Teachers Union. So we asked that schools submit all of their schedules for review to ensure that it is in alignment with our collective bargaining agreement. We've also given schools the parameters for scheduling and planning time during the day and also for morning blocks. And we've also set up a structure where if teachers feel that any of that is not being honored, they can report that and we'll review it to make sure it is in alignment with our CPA.
Dr. Bay, are you trying to say something to push me
I think
over?
sorry, the only thing that I would add to that is, as the chancellor mentioned, we have provided additional support to all schools as it relates to their master schedule. Because a lot of times, as it related to the protected planning time, it was really around making sure that it works within the schedule. And so we've provided targeted support to all of our schools, including elementary, where we have scheduling roundtables where we're able to sit down with their principals as well as their schedulers to make sure that they are allocating the appropriate minutes for planning for all of their courses and content. So it's been an intentional focus to make sure teachers are getting the time that they need.
Okay, and I see Councilmember Parker glaring at me, and I will call it. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Parker.
Thank you. Chancellor, I wanted to come back to focus on some specific Ward 5 schools. Langley Elementary has a retention rate of 56%. Brooklyn Middle is recorded at 61%. Wheatley is at 71%, and Dunbar is at 78%. So I just am pulling those out. Thinking about Langley at 56%. Can you speak to what's being done to support that school specifically, or schools that are in that range of retention? And then secondly, internally, is there a metric or a period of time where leadership at DCPS identifies a school in trouble or in crisis to say we need more interventions because they are headed in the wrong way in terms of retention?
So yeah, let's start with the latter part of your question. The answer is yes. So we review data around academic performance, retention, attendance, a lot of our indicators of school health and performance. And we look for trends where there is underperformance for consecutive years or for extended period of time. Those schools report directly to me at least 3 to 4 times a year in person on what their improvement plans are. And each school is required to have a plan that's very customized, specific to what the challenges are for their school. They also receive our most intensive support from our central services team. And if a school leader is not able to make marked improvement, then we think about other ways in which we can support that principal, or whether or not, that's the right fit for that individual.
And to interject here, I know I'm adding another question, but when you say they'll receive support from Central, what does that look like as it relates to teacher retention if that is the focus of the coaching and support?
So they will set targets around the areas that we identify for improvement, right? So if it's teacher retention, we'll look at their hiring data, retention data. Sometimes we even look at teacher attendance data. And we set strategies with the principal. We also look at benchmarks throughout the year. So what's happening in term 1, what's happening at the middle of the year, what's happening in term 3. So we do progress monitoring throughout the year, but the goal is to ensure that there's proper strategies, and the strategies are resourced. And so this is the time where we also look at, do they need additional resources? Do they need additional resources from central services? But again, I do want to highlight, we've had 4 consecutive years of reducing central services. And so we do have significant less FTEs to support this. So we have leaned into a tiered approach where the most intensive support goes to our schools that I've described that have had a history or a period of time of underperformance in some of our key indicators.
Understood. And so and I do want to get back to what is specifically being done for a school like Langley, but when you say we monitor over time, retention rates, and those schools are checking in regularly 3 to 4 times a year and receive support, is there a benchmark or a threshold on average? So schools under 60%, 70%?
We look at the entire district, and we provide those support based on, say, for example, it may be schools that have 2 years of underperformance. So we look at duration, not just the actual number, because we know that there are
Understood.
ebbs and flows and it does fluctuate. But if we do see a number that is trending downward for consecutive years, that's when we will flag that school to be evaluated to determine if that's a school that we need to monitor more closely.
Understood. And how many schools are in that category now in terms of receiving intensive support because of teacher retention?
Well, there's 13 schools receiving intensive support, and it could be a number of different reasons. But last year, solely for retention, we had 15 schools that we were focused on. And I mentioned earlier, we have Teach Upbeat as another strategy as well, and that's solely focused on retention. And there are 10 schools that receive that support.
Got it. And then for a school like Langley, what should we expect? Because when I look at this 56% stat, that's alarming. And when it's actually surprising as well when I think about just how that school community is rallying and wrapping its arms around the young people there. So, like, what is DCPS doing for a school like that?
Thank you for the question. So Langley is one of our schools that is an intensive school. It is prioritized by the instructional superintendent as well as our cluster support model. So as of right now, and we're about halfway through the year, we've had 92 coaching visits and touch points with Langley in some capacity, whether that
Wow.
is coaching directly of specific teachers, providing additional support to instructional coaches, the instructional superintendent having targeted support with the principal. I've been in a number of sessions with the school leadership team as well as our central service team in order to help them to unpack their comprehensive school plan, ensure that they have the right strategies in place, making sure that they are actively monitoring those strategies for fidelity. And so a school like that is going to receive a multitude of support in a variety of different capacities, both at the leadership level as well as individual teacher level.
Yeah, I mean, that's staggering when I hear, I'm glad you all are doing it in the sense of 90 plus interactions. That's significant for one school. What is the trade-off of having central office provide that level of support versus dedicating funding for Langley so that they can have an in-house person do some of that work? Or asked differently, might the needs that this school or others have trigger more investments when you're doing your annual school budgets versus having to deploy somebody from central office for 90 plus interactions?
Yeah, at times there are additional support. So we're also fortunate to receive dollars from OSSI as a part of supports for schools that are falling in the bottom tiers for performance. And this is an area where we look at a school's budget, and the instructional superintendent and principals can make requests for additional resources, for additional budget assistance, if we believe that that's the best approach for that school. And we typically see building capacity for instructional coaching. So for example, a school may say, hey, I need an instructional coach for math for grades 3 through 5. And if they're not able to support that through their allocation, then we would review that and determine if they need additional dollars to purchase those positions. And that typically happens in the spring in our budget development process as schools build their personnel for the upcoming school year.
Understood. So that it's clear, like the level of intensive support that a school like Langley is receiving. Is teacher retention part of like school leader evaluations? Is that part of what they're being evaluated on year to year?
Yeah, thank you for the question. It is a data point. It's one data point amongst other data points that we look at that we continue to monitor throughout the year and that we work directly with the principal and the school leadership team when we're determining what areas within the building are working well and where are the areas that we need to focus. So it's definitely a data point that we look at. And we provide, again, all of that support that we talk about, provide that support in order to build capacity within the building so that teachers will remain the teachers who are the most effective.
Understood. Just a tangent, if it were part of their formal evaluation, I wonder what impact that might have in school leaders working even more intentionally to keep staff and teachers. We want the right people, but I just wonder if that incentive would make a market difference. One last question I have is around whether or not you all track teacher movement based on budget changes or decisions. And so school X budget is reduced, they have to let these 3 teachers go. Are you tracking that? And is that also incorporated in these average retention rates?
So shifts in the budget can change a school's allocation. Sometimes that's driven by enrollment. Sometimes that's driven by changes in the student population. So for example, a school may be losing or gaining some self-contained classroom that serve students with IEPs. In general, we do see when there are reductions to personnel, many of those teachers stay within the district. They go to other schools in DCPS, but reductions are based into the retention data that we've been discussing today. So that could be a factor.
Understood. And I would just say, in moving forward, and I know I'm at time, Mr. Chairman, moving forward, it could be helpful to denote impacts on retention based on forced budget changes, because some changes are out of a school's control. And I think it's unfair for them to get dinged if they're having to give up a teacher, for instance. I did also want to say, good to see you as well, Dr. Beck. But thank you all for your responses. I'm going to jump back to another hearing, and thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Councilmember Parker. I think Schools First took care of a lot of what you were just asking about in terms of budget stability. Chancellor, how does DCPS use the Insight survey data?
Yeah, so it's a tool that we use to help plan. So we've been talking today a lot about the coaching supports, the professional learning experiences that teachers receive. Insight data is one of the many data points that we look at to determine what a school might need as they're developing their plans based on the needs of the educators in their building.
So when Insight survey is done once a year, a couple times a year?
Correct. It previously was done twice a year. Currently is done once a year and is done in the spring.
And so you look at the data when?
So it typically early spring is when it's assessed. We get it back late spring. We try to ensure that it's incorporated into the way the school is thinking about their investments for the following year.
Even though it sounds like that's after the budget has been developed.
It is depends on when we're looking at the initial budget allocation and the second, but sometimes by the time that they've done their initial allocation, the Insight data would have come after that, to your point.
Yeah, so spring is like March, April, maybe May,
Correct.
or actually April, May, maybe June.
But they can make adjustments.
So, but the
thereafter.
Insight survey is going to give you a sense of the school climate or culture, correct?
Yeah, it could identify where teachers are expressing concerns around climate or culture, or it could identify needs for professional development as well.
Sure. And so those decisions are made by whom? By just DC Central, by Dr. Bay? Who makes those decisions?
So schools are responsible for doing their data analysis. Many schools do their analysis with their LSAT, for example, or their SCAT team.
With regard to the Insight survey?
Correct. So for example, I spoke with a PTO team this week. That team has been reviewing their Insight data with their school principal, which is not unusual, right? So it's something that I think schools look at to determine what do they need to do to be responsive to the needs of the teacher of their building. But again, I would say is one of many data points that a school would look at.
How do you evaluate principals for retention?
We look at trends. I think, as I said with Councilmember Parker, there are ebbs and flows to retention, and there are good reasons why teachers transition and sometimes teachers relocate. But I think if we see a history of trends of moving in a downward trajectory, those are areas of concern that we lean in to determine what's driving those numbers and how we can best support that school in improving their retention.
So my question was about how do you evaluate principals for retention?
Again, trends in their data.
So one of those trends is teacher turnover?
It could be, yes.
Could be. Not is, but could be.
Yeah. There could be reasons why a school could be having transitions, and we are aware of those driving factors. But if there's downward trends that we can't explain or there's no good explanation for, then certainly be an area for goal setting for the principal as a part of their impact goals for the year.
Do you regularly evaluate principals for retention?
I'm not sure what you mean, do we regular? As I said earlier,
How often do you evaluate a
we look at
principal?
retention data every year.
No. Evaluating principals. That's different than looking at retention data.
Well, it would be determined whether or not it's in their goals for the year. Sometimes it's a part of their impact goals, and whether or not it's in their impact goals would be determined by their specific data for their school.
So going back to minor, which is a 50% retention rate, the teacher retention may or may not be in the evaluation criteria for the principal.
Yeah, it could be. And I think if there was a concern around the data, obviously we've shared our concerns today at a school like Minor. Yes, it would be very likely that that would be incorporated formally into their evaluation, but it is not a factor formally in everyone's evaluation.
In your response to pre-hearing questions, you noted that at least 10% of teachers planning to leave in the spring of 2025 cited two main reasons: dissatisfaction with school leadership or their immediate supervisor, or dissatisfaction with the school environment. Sounds somewhat similar to me, those two. These seem like areas where targeted improvements could make a real difference in retention. So what specific steps are you taking to address these concerns when you see them in the exit surveys?
Well, we have a focus this year on consistency across all of our clusters, as I shared earlier in testimony. We believe that consistency allows our school leaders to perform at the best, and we believe when they're thriving and able to support their school communities, we don't see as many of those issues related to school leadership. So that's the focus for us this current school year.
It didn't sound to me like explicitly using exit survey results to address specific steps with regard to specific schools.
Well, if there's specific data, then we customize and tailor that approach to that specific school leader. I'm just speaking to district-wide strategy. So for example, one area we hear feedback from is around setting clear expectations around student behavior, norms, and routines that support teachers in the work that they do in their classroom and throughout the building. That's been a focus for us, as you heard earlier, via the power practices. And so we listen for feedback and ways in which we can be responsive to challenges that teachers identify with school leadership, but also how we can bring greater consistency across the district. And I think what's really valuable for me is the focus groups and the conversations that we're able to have directly with teachers that just doesn't speak at a high level to survey data, but gets to some of the details and some of the experiences of our educators.
So I'm not feeling like the exit survey data is being used as well as it could be based on your answer. So my question was, it seems like there are areas where targeted improvements could make a real difference in retention. So the exit survey from teachers at a particular school show a lot of dissatisfaction with the school climate, but I'm not getting a sense that then you've got a team that is actually looking at that, seeing that, saying, this is a problem at this school. We're going to take some specific steps to address these concerns and improve teacher satisfaction. That's what I'm hearing in your answer. So let me try this. Insight survey data shows that 31% of educators disagreed with the statement, quote, "At my school, performance evaluation ratings are accurate reflections of teacher effectiveness," unquote. This has been a constant theme in teacher feedback regarding impact. How is DCPS working to ensure that teachers feel their instructional practice is evaluated in a fair, productive, and equitable way?
Again, I think this is a great example where consistency is important. If there is a sense that there is inequity or there isn't a consistent way in which teachers are being evaluated, we want to ensure that we're supporting principals and create an environment where there is greater consistency.
Well, let's talk about consistency. One of the factors in the impact evaluation is CSC, commitments to school community, correct?
Correct.
Okay, so we looked at CSCs from several schools across the district. Let's compare school A to school B. School A, for the CSC, serve as a testing coordinator for a formative and/or summative assessment, serve on the WTU elected committee, organize and lead 2 staff wellness events, consistent participation in green team meetings, serve as a new to the school mentor. That's school A. School B, here are the criteria for their CSC evaluation: create and lead professional development. I'll pick a different school. Coach non-compensated DC scores, DCIAA sport. Facilitate a weekly after-school club. Sell concessions at home games at a sporting event. School A, serve as testing coordinator. Didn't I say something about green team meetings? School B, which actually was school C, coach non-compensated DC scores, DCIAA sport, after-school club. Doesn't sound consistent to me at all.
Well, I think this is one of the areas where we do allow variability because I think each school community is very different in terms of the way we think about engagement. I do want to call out that the impact team does review all of these rubrics for fidelity. Now, one of the areas that the WTU has raised that I am looking at is I think that there is some challenges in terms of whether or not these activities can be done during their tour of duty. And many of these activities, some of which you referenced, will require work outside of the tour of duty. So I do think there's a tension there that we're thinking about to be responsive to that feedback, but
So I appreciate that. How long has Impact been around?
it's been
10
around
years.
for a long time,
10 years?
long time,
15 years?
long time.
We'll go with 15. That gets us back to 2010. And so in 2026, wait a minute, I've just listened to 3 hours of you saying intermittently, consistency is important. We were talking about evaluations, for example. Part of the impact, which is in evaluation, is the commitments to school community. And this is grossly disparate requirements, grossly different. There's no consistency at all. And we've had impact for 15 years and we're just now figuring this out?
Well, we made adjustments especially I know in the last 8 years of my tenure, there's been revisions to the rubrics, there are revisions to the tools, there've been training. I think this is an area that has recently been called out for us as an area of concern, but I do believe that there are particular categories, especially when we start talking about community engagement, where that looks different from school to school, each community and each grade level. And so I think it is appropriate to have some variability there. I do think that there are some concerns that have been raised most recently that are somewhat legitimate that we need to think more about in terms of the tour duty and also when teachers are being expected to complete some of these activities.
Well, let me just say, I think the commitment to school community is an important consideration. I get that teachers ought to have different ways to demonstrate commitment to school community. But I can't believe that after 15 years, there is such disparity allowed. Oh, here's another school. Plan 2 field trips. That wasn't school A or school B. So yesterday we heard quite a bit of testimony with regard to,
And I think just to put a bow on this, a lot of schools utilize the feedback they get from their families and their students in terms of gaps that they see with engagement with staff. And so we want to make sure that we're responsive to what students and families are saying to us about how they would like to see educators engage. And a lot of principals use that type of information to help inform their
really,
expectations.
parents are like saying, well, gosh, we want to see, actually, I don't want to spend any more time on this, but I don't believe that parents are saying, I actually want to see Ms. Smith doing 2 field trips. Yesterday, we received quite a bit of testimony with regard to how new teachers are helped. And I did talk about that a little bit earlier. There was one witness who testified 31 states have laws or regulations regarding induction and mentoring that last 2 to 4 years. DCPS has 1 week for induction. Along those lines, walk me through the process of supporting a new teacher and learning about impact. Additionally, how are we gathering feedback from teachers on their first year experience and using that input to improve the onboarding process for a more productive and positive start?
Well, I'll talk to Dr. Bay to talk a little bit about the informal, but I think the week is not an accurate account. That's the formal part of the process that everyone receives from the district, but each school is empowered to continue that process throughout a teacher's journey. And what we found in the feedback that we receive from our educators is that they find the development opportunities and coaching at the school level to be the most valuable in terms of their journey.
So you're kind of dismissing the substantial amount of testimony yesterday that induction, that is onboarding a new teacher, the testimony being that it was inadequate, not helpful enough, needed to be more, there needed to be more of it. You're just dismissing all that.
No, I'm not dismissing. You said it's only a week. I'm just clarifying. There are formal and informal elements to the way we.
Then why are so
people
many
through the
witnesses saying it's inadequate?
Yeah, I think those are questions that we need to dig deeper into. I think it does vary by school in the way teachers receive their supports. It is something that we'll take to our teacher advisory team as well to get additional feedback. But we do hear a lot of teachers who give us different feedback. And so I don't want to take the anecdotal notes from, those that are testify as, diminish and not value, but we do hear a lot from teachers that they find it be very helpful what we already provide to teachers, but I think there's opportunities to improve it. And we'll take that feedback.
So, but
back to
I'm
the team.
hearing, when you say anecdotal, that's kind of being a little dismissive of yesterday's testimony.
Like I said, we're not dismissing, but
But hold on,
we're hearing from us
Behind
small
this
subset.
behind this question is the statistical reality that the percentage of teachers turning over after 1 year is higher than for all the other years. So clearly more attention needs to be spent on these new teachers. I'm asking about induction. There was all this testimony yesterday. So I wouldn't just say, well, it's anecdotal.
Well, I don't think you're hearing from the vast majority of our teachers. So to make an assumption that is inadequate based on testimony. that you've heard,
Statistically, I'm looking at this number, 0 to 1 year, teachers who remain, 74%. 74% is 3/4. That's overwhelming.
And that-
26%, hold on, 26% leaving is still higher than all the other averages we've talked about.
Yeah, but
I'm
that's
focused
that's-
on the 26%.
That's not inconsistent with what you would see nationally in a district in terms of
So it's
beginning
okay.
teaching. I'm not saying okay. I'm saying you're saying that
No,
those
I'm saying,
issues
so what are you
are.
doing? How are we gathering feedback from teachers on their first year experience and using that input to improve the onboarding process? That was my question. It was also supporting walk me through the process of supporting a new teacher and learning about impact.
Yeah, so I explained to you earlier that the week that you described is much beyond that. I'll let Dr. Bates share a little bit more about how we provide that development through the teacher experience. In the new teacher orientation that teachers receive over the summer, they get sessions on impact. So they get very explicit information about what to expect, what the tool is, and how it's utilized. Now, it just doesn't stop there. When a teacher transitions into their role at the school, that work continues with their school principal as well. And we also have documents that we provide to teachers around what they should know about impact and how it's implemented in the district. But you want to share a little bit more about how schools support beginning teachers?
Yep. I think this focus on new teachers is so important. I remember my first year as a teacher, and if it wasn't for the mentorship that I received and the continued support from my principal, I wouldn't have been able to continue. And so this focus on new teachers and teachers who are new to the profession is really important. And it goes beyond, as the chancellor mentioned, the induction week. Schools create targeted support plans for their new teachers in which they are getting targeted support, whether it is internalizing their lessons, developing deeper content knowledge as it relates to the subject that they are teaching. They are part of collaborative planning opportunities, LEAP opportunities, as well as getting targeted coaching and support, not only from their instructional coach or TLI, but also mentors within the building. And that happens throughout the year. In addition to the district-wide support that we provide in terms of new teacher professional learning communities that take place and happen periodically throughout the year, both for their grade level as well as content areas. So there are a variety of touch points that occur for new teachers in order to support them. I think the biggest thing that we continue to see with new teachers, and this isn't new, this is just a part of the profession, is that it's a lot that comes at them as a first-year teacher, right? You're learning how to do this job that is very complex and very challenging. And so the more support that we're able to provide them throughout the year, we tend to see that their practice gets better. We tend to see that their frustration levels go down. And we just continue to support them to ensure that they are able to be their best selves. And so it is an area that we will continue to focus on. Balancing the district support that we provide centrally with the targeted support that they receive at their school, because their schools know them best. Their schools are school leaders, their instructional coaches are with them on a daily basis. And so they're going to know what their needs are in a more intimate way than we would know centrally, but we will continue to balance the support that we provide in both areas.
So I'm way over my time, and I now probably owe all kinds of things to my colleague, Councilmember Fruman.
You don't owe all kinds of things to me, but I am glad that you stopped. I just have a couple of questions, and you can go on indefinitely after that. On the professional development, I mean, one of the things I understand that there may be a waiver required, that it may be crafted by folks at the school, but a waiver required. And not now, but at some point I'd be curious to hear how often are those waivers for professional development proposed by a school denied? And how long does it take to respond? So I'm not asking you to do that right now, but we want principals to be empowered and the system to work smoothly, and professional development is one of those things. Everybody talks about the desire to craft it at the school level. We want it to happen as smoothly as possible. Two other topics, and you've touched on them before, but I'm going to ask you to speak a little bit more about it. Special education teachers. I think there's a challenge. There's a challenge in recruitment for special education teachers. There's a challenge in retention for special education teachers. It is as hard a job as there is. And we hear special education teachers who feel overwhelmed. So I'm curious what you're doing, particularly in the setting of special education, to try to make sure teachers are supported in the classrooms. Because sometimes we hear about somebody who says, I have a roster of kids and the IEP adds up to 80 hours a week and there's only one of me. But what are we doing to make sure that they're fully supported in the classroom and to try to address the particular needs in this area? Because it has been a long-standing challenge for the district, and it is a place where performance has not moved as much as we would want. Talk to me about what you're doing in that space.
It is a focus for us because it is a hard to fill area. The good news is that we have seen 91% of our teachers retain who serve students with IEPs, that's special education educators. And within school district numbers are relatively consistent. I think it's like 82%. But it is an area where it is hard to fill, and we focus a lot on, I know we said professional development and working conditions a lot, but that has truly been the effort, not only for all of our teachers, but intentionally with special education. Also looking at the tasks that are more operational and their documentation to see what we can do to streamline that and to create opportunities for them to complete that work in a more efficient manner. There are also very specific subgroups that are focused on gathering feedback from our special education educators in ways that we haven't had before, to think about what can we do differently. When the feedback we've heard is the types of supports within their classroom. I mentioned earlier the effectiveness of the instructional aids, and especially in the self-contained settings, is often critical to what the educator can provide for students. And we spent a lot of time this year thinking about the supports for those individuals along with what the teachers receive as well.
Okay, appreciate that. Did you say 91% retention of teachers, of students with IEPs?
Correct. So over 91% of our SPED teachers stay in the district, which is above the district
Which
average.
is, that's 90 in terms of staying in the district, and it's 91 for SPED, okay?
Yeah.
And then 82,
82 stayed in their school.
I see, which is one below, but not different, part of what you're saying. I do think that the supports in the classroom, from what I hear, is a very, very important thing. And that'll segue me to my last question, which is about paraprofessionals. And I don't know whether the instructional aides in a special education classroom fit into that basket. But this is an area where the compensation has been very low. It's I think that there may be negotiations going on. What are we doing to try to make it as attractive as possible to recruit and retain those folks who are key to recruiting and retaining the teachers who are the lead teachers in the classroom?
Yeah, we are in the midst of negotiation. I think you hit it spot on. We've had some success with signing bonuses, but we do need to continue to look at compensation. That's a driving factor. Now, the second area that we've identified is very promising is the types of development opportunities we have for our paraprofessionals and our instructional aides. They are eager to be trained in the specific areas that their students need support in their classroom. And we've seen when their capacity is expanded, they can be more successful, and also it lightens the load for the special education educator for that classroom as well. So I think focusing on that entire ecosystem will benefit both the student and the staff in the room, being the paraprofessionals and the teacher of record.
So I appreciate that. And I also think these are people who could someday be teachers. And so it's part of a recruitment and a stability process. So part of the phenomenon of these oversight hearings is, and I love the Heisenberg principle, which is the act of observing changes the phenomenon observed. And I hope you feel, I hear that there's progress, but I hope you feel the intensity of the interest of all of us here on the council to see all of these things get better. And I don't want to take away from what's been accomplished, but absolutely, we can't rest on our laurels, and you can be certain we'll be back again asking, where is this? What's happening with the trends? And to me, the key to your success when I listen to all the witnesses at all the different hearings is working conditions. How do we support our teachers and make it as attractive as possible for them to stay and grow? That's the theme that I hear, and I hope it's part of what you are hearing as well.
It is. We do understand and I agree there's still a lot more work to do. I do think it's important to build under the strategies that have been effective in helping us improve our numbers. And it's things that go outside of the classroom. One area that we've seen progress and got a lot of positive feedback is the school calendar. It's important to note this is the first year in forever where we had 2 full weeks for the winter break. And that is direct response to feedback that we received from educators about the time needed during the break and the way we schedule breaks. In addition to that, the way we schedule our wellness days. So I think it's not just the working conditions in the classroom, but the overall structures that create the conditions for teachers to thrive in and outside of the classroom is something that we're constantly thinking about how we get better, because we know we have to compete, right? And we want DCPS to continue to be the first choice for our educators.
I really appreciate it. You saw me sort of moving to cut you off because I want to model good behavior and stop leaving time on the clock. So thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Whoa, trying to embarrass me here. Thank you, Councilmember Froon. Chancellor, what supports have been most effective in improving principal retention for new principals?
I think the development that they receive when they're in the district prior to their appointment. So as I shared in my testimony, the building the capacity for our assistant principals, which are often the individuals we hire for principalships, has been a strong strategy for DCPS. And we are continually thinking about how do we ensure that our assistant principals are highly effective so that when we do have vacancies in the district, they're ready and prepared to take on the roles. When they transition to these roles, I think the instructional superintendent plays a critical role in their development and preparing them for their school community. I think one area that we've seen progress and we need to continue to improve is helping principals with hiring, because oftentimes the talent strategy for that school is one of the biggest priorities for that school over the summer. I also think community engagement is another area where we're supporting new principals. There's communities. How do they get to know their community? How do they understand the strengths and opportunities so they can quickly begin to be responsive to their school communities?
To what extent are you changing and adapting and modifying your strategies as a result of feedback from principals on your approaches?
Oh, I mean, I think the power practices is one earlier that we described in terms of having consistent expectations for routines, operations in the school. We also heard from principals that there's a desire for us to think about, the types of experiences that we provide for teachers over the summer in terms of math instruction, which has been a focus for us, especially coming out of our recovery period. And we've seen a lot of progress in math. Another area where we've gotten a lot of feedback is our English language arts curriculum. And we're currently evaluating some options to refresh that curriculum to ensure that it's intuitive, it's teacher friendly, and it provides an opportunity for teachers to be at their best for English language arts instruction.
So,
And I go back, I mentioned the calendar. I mean, I think the principals also weighed in to the calendar as well. I think, calendar doesn't sound like a lot, but it's been something that principals has asked us to focus on. Another example would be just looking at when we have spring breaks and trying to align as much as possible with surrounding districts because they've identified it's a challenge when DCPS is on a different schedule and other school districts are not aligned with us.
so yesterday, no, let me start this way. So the last I checked, principals were human beings.
Mhm.
And just like all human beings, some are superior and some are excellent, and not all are superior and not all are excellent. So yesterday I asked a question of instructional superintendent Lappy, who by the way was very impressive here. And I asked him, how do you deal quickly with getting rid of the worst? Maybe I phrased it a little differently. How do you deal with the worst of the principals that you work with? He kind of ducked the question, which I understand, but I'm hopeful that you won't duck the question. So how do you deal quickly with getting rid of the worst principals? Bad principals equal high turnover. I've seen this in schools from time to time. The teachers start complaining to me in October. The complaints escalate in November, December. By January, it's pretty bad. Teachers are saying they're going to leave. Next year comes and there's 50% turnover in the school. How do you deal with getting rid of the worst principals quickly?
Well, thank you for the acknowledgement for instructional super Lappy. He was an assistant principal in the district. I think that's the trajectory that we strive for. It
I
serves
did
us
want to
well.
give him a hard time for not staying as principal, but now since we want stability in our principalships, but I chose not to go there and I don't want to distract from my own question to you. How do
Yeah, I
you
think when
deal
there are,
quickly with getting rid of the worst?
I think when there are concerns that are identified, I think we need to quickly identify strategies to support a principal or a teacher in those areas that they're not performing well. And we also solicit feedback from them. What can we do to ensure that you're more effective in this work? And we give them time to work their plan of improvement. Now, if we don't see improvement over time, maybe we change the way we approach the supports that we provide them. And then we continue to reevaluate and reassess. But if we continue to provide those supports and we're adjusting for their needs and there doesn't appear to be improvement, then we have to think about, is this the right person for this role? And sometimes we make improvement. Most times we do, but sometimes we don't. And then we have to make adjustments accordingly. And
Well,
that's the
some
way.
of this is not, your answer is not sounding like it's quickly. It sounds like it's slow and deliberative.
Well, we give
Is
people,
it hard
we
to
give
figure
people
out?
opportunity to improve. I think if you develop a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day plan for improvement, you want to ensure that they're meeting those expectations over time. Because, like you said, we're dealing with human beings where there's always improvement opportunities. And we don't think about principals as, oh, these are the worst principals or the worst teachers or worst educators in the district. We think about opportunities for improvement, right? And we try to focus on those opportunities and provide the supports for individuals to improve in those areas where we identify a need for improvement.
But it is a fact that of 117 principals, there are a few who are the lowest performing. That's just a reality.
It-
And the time it takes to try to improve them is sort of like admitting that there isn't the judgment to identify someone who is not going to improve enough in a year. When a school is falling apart because the principal is not good, the teachers are upset, morale is declining, teachers are talking about leaving, teachers do leave. We've kind of set back, I'll rephrase that, we have set back that school at least a year, and we've hurt the students in that school. So when there is a poorly performing principal, it seems to me that some urgency is called for.
Yeah,
Maybe not fire them from the system, but probably, but at least get them out of the school to stabilize the school. Stabilize, a word I like a lot. So how do you deal quickly with getting rid of the worst?
Yeah, so we always approach opportunities for improvement with great urgency. As you know, we also have collective bargaining agreements that guide our progressive discipline in the way we hold individuals accountable. So we're always going to be aligned to that as well.
Including principals.
Principals and teachers, correct. And as you know, there is a collective bargaining agreement with the CSA, Council of School Officers, and we follow the protocols in that agreement as we think about performance management for our school leaders. But the reality is, majority of our school principals have been with us a very long time, and we've had great success with supporting them. And if there's a need for improvement, as I said earlier, we approach it with a very urgent approach. And if we don't see the improvement needed within reasonable time, then we follow the CBA on next steps.
I can't say I'm satisfied with that answer.
Yeah, it's interesting. It's one of the areas that you brought to my attention early on in my tenure was that there was dissatisfaction with yearly contracts with principals, and they needed
Correct,
longer contracts
Correct.
because they needed more time to improve.
correct.
And we embodied that approach. And I think
And that was good.
it has served us well that we give individuals reasonable time to improve, and our focus is on the types of support that we provide to them.
It's a little bit different issue. Working with them to improve is a little bit different than getting rid of the annual contract, which meant that every year they were unsure if they had a job the following year. I'm talking about the lowest performing and not talking about, and it's a different issue, an annual contract for all 117 principals.
Yeah, but I think it is related in the sense in terms of, how quickly you're dismissing individuals can often be related to the length of their contract.
I'm going to change the subject. We heard testimony yesterday from a number of witnesses about substitute teachers. Now I'm going somewhere completely different with this. But it came up yesterday, and that's why I'm bringing it up here. There was testimony about the need to budget for substitute teachers at schools, especially schools at risk. You're aware of the testimony?
I'm aware of that. I think the concern was raised around admin premium.
No,
Okay,
not yesterday.
okay.
It was that schools, especially at-risk schools, should have, that the council should add, and if the mayor doesn't, add to the budget for the highest at-risk schools, for one or two substitute teachers. And where I'm going with my question here is, doesn't the principal already have the authority or the ability, if he or she wants, to budget for one or two substitute teachers?
They do.
DCPS Central is not prohibiting from that.
No, we're not prohibiting it.
So this is a choice of the principal whether to have on his or her payroll a substitute teacher.
That is correct. Now, if they can't afford it in their allocation, they can make a budget request as a part of the budget assistance period. And we prioritize schools based on need and performance to determine, which schools will get those additional allocations. But if they can't fund it and they want it, then that's something that we look at and consider.
So let me just say,
The caution I have on that is when you have an individual or individuals in the building and they're not absences for that day, what we've seen is there is significant amount of unproductive time because that individual isn't assigned to a particular classroom. Where it works well is if that individual has other duties and responsibilities and that person is also substituting as well, because there often isn't a need for an individual to be a substitute if they're in a building every day. It just varies by teacher absences.
I would agree. There was interesting testimony from at least one of the charter schools that they do budget for one or two substitute teachers at their school. I'm assuming that the substitute teacher does other duties if there's not a need to substitute in a classroom. But I think where I really want to go with this question, and maybe it's at this point I'm making a statement, is that there is a fair amount of principal autonomy. And I think sometimes advocates forget that these decisions that they don't like are decisions that are a choice by, in this case with substitutes, a principal. I have one last question. Ms. Ross, because we've ignored you for so long. I have a question here about why we have not yet gotten the educator workforce report, but you noted in your testimony that it's done every 2 years.
That's exactly right. So a number of years ago, OSSE started annually publishing the data for which there are so much demand, our educator retention data. And we do that every winter as soon as the faculty and staff data collection closes and we have a moment to analyze those data. And indeed, those are the data we've been discussing here today. In order to provide interested stakeholders with a landscape view of lots of different types of data and to do deeper analyses, such as the analysis that we discussed about transitions of teachers from schools serving higher and lower rates of students with at different economic statuses, we publish those data in our longer educator workforce report. Our educator retention brief is about 2 pages. Our educator workforce report runs about 45 pages. And so we publish that report every other year. It provides us with an opportunity to do a deeper analysis and to include more year-over-year comparisons.
So I'm not sure I asked you the question yet. Why don't you publish it annually?
We actually want to do those deeper analyses, and we want to do them with a collection of data over time. So we know that there's routinely a very high level of interest in our educator retention data, our teacher retention data, our principal retention data, and so we prioritize publishing those data annually. We publish all of the data that comprise the educator workforce report on our website in flat files, so the data themselves are available, but we take a 2-year period and we like to compare data over multiple years for the educator workforce report. And so the goal of the report is different. The audience for the report is different. And it's designed to put us in a position where we can take more of a landscape or longitudinal view. I'm very, very excited that this year we'll be including in that report a specific focus on a lot of the work that we've done to ensure that our educators are well trained to support our students in becoming competent competent, confident, and joyful readers. So we'll be talking a lot about the literacy supports that we have in place. And it's that kind of work that we can do within the context over a longer period, a 2-year period of analysis and data collection that is not included in the annual educator retention brief.
So to rephrase and summarize what you just said, you don't want to do it every year, and you think there's a greater value in having a 2-year period to analyze.
We're always making determinations about
I don't know if
where.
it was a yes or no.
I would frame it slightly differently. We're always making determinations about how to use our analysis power and resources internally. And what we have found is that there's a lot of hunger for us to put out the raw data every year. And so we've prioritized doing that. There's a lot of hunger for us to do the analysis and to publish easy to read, easy to understand graphs every year around educator retention. We found that the audience for our educator retention report, which again is a much lengthier and more substantive publication, tends to be smaller and tends to be more interested in those deeper analyses, which it takes us more time to do. So it's certainly a choice that we're making, and I feel so lucky that we have been able to continue to protect and prioritize not only our data collection, but indeed these analyses. This is the kind of work that's very atypical to happen in other jurisdictions. And so I'm really grateful and proud to work on a team that continues to prioritize making this information available and analyzing it in different ways in different audiences and at different grain sizes over the course of a 1 or 2 year period.
Give me just a second. Thank you. I have no other questions. Chancellor, there was at least one thing I asked for, the teach update information.
Yes.
Excuse me, teach upbeat information. If you could get that to us. The record is open for 2 weeks or will close in 2 weeks. The time is 1:50 p.m. and this hearing's adjourned.